Chapter 13-17. Xiao Hua didn't know that comprehending the Tao of Heaven was a supreme cultivation method. He only thought that it was a shortcut to speed up his cultivation and let him use one day as 3 days. He was in a very good mood. Previously, he thought that if others cultivated for 1 year, he would need to cultivate for 12 years. Now, he should be able to reduce it to 4 years. Alas, if others cultivated for 1 year, it would be equivalent to 4 years of your cultivation. If it was an ordinary person, they would have already been dispirited. But for Xiao Hua, it was a kind of surprise. It was like seeing a ray of light in the dark night. Happily, Xiao Hua got up from the ground, stretched his body, and walked towards the door. Not waiting for him to open the door, he heard a clear and melodious voice outside. "Nyang Qin, this little immortal, when will he get up? Why did he wake up later than Xie? What a lazy bug. Shut up." Fan Riguan's voice was also low, as if he was trying to lower his voice. "Xie, quiet, don't disturb Master Xiao's cultivation. Immortal doesn't sleep." Obviously he's lazing in bed. Zhu Xie still emphasized. It seemed that Xiao Hua didn't change her impression of him because he broke the spell on her body yesterday and changed her fate. Xiao Hua smiled and pushed the door open. His strong eyes shone directly on his face. Of course, it was already close to noon. No wonder Zhu Xie complained. Seeing Xiao Hua come out of the room, Zhu's old woman trembled and stepped forward. With the help of Zhu Feng, she bowed and greeted, "Immortal Xiao, good morning." Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and looked at the sun. He smiled bitterly and returned the greeting. "It seems that it's already late." "Yes, mother and grandmother were here early in the morning," Zhu Xie said first. "Xie." Zhu's old woman was angry and scolded. "Who asked you to talk? It's also strange. Usually, a 4 or 5-year-old child would hold their mother's hand and hide behind her mother to look at strangers. But this Zhu Xie is very precocious. Since she saw Xiao Hua yesterday, she has been acting like a 10-year-old child." Xiao Hua shook his head slightly and said to Zhu Feng, "Sister-in-law, after the pain last night, how do you feel today?" Zhu Feng's face was full of panic. She supported her mother and said anxiously, "Immortal Xiao, please don't call me like that. Just calling her Madam Zhu is enough." Xiao Hua smiles but doesn't say anything. Zhu Feng thinks for a while then says somewhat embarrassedly, "I'll let Daoist Xiao know. Last night, after taking Daoist Xiao's immortal pill, I felt extremely comfortable at first. Then, my whole body was in pain and I couldn't keep my mind clear. Later on, I don't remember anything. When I entered the city, I heard from Chia's father that it was Spiritual Master Xiao who helped us last night. Once again, I would like to thank Spiritual Master Xiao for his kindness." With that, Zhu Feng let go of her mother's arm and pulled Zhu Xie to kneel again. Xiao Hua hurriedly supported her and said, "It's just a small matter, you don't have to do this." After that, Xiao Hua still put his fingers on Zhu Feng and Zhu Xie's wrists. After looking at them for a while, he said to Fan Riguan, "From what I see, your wife and daughter are in the same situation as old madam. As for whether the so-called spell has been broken, I don't know." Fan Riguan glanced at his mother and said to Xiao Hua with a smile, "Mother has already discussed with this little one. Spiritual Master Xiao's immortal pill should be the most effective in breaking the spell in the Zhu family for thousands of years. It's not much different from what the ancestors of the Zhu family guessed. If there is no accident, this insidious spell should have been broken. As for whether it has really been broken or not, only when my wife reaches 50 years old will we know. No matter what, Spiritual Master Xiao is the great benefactor of my Zhu family. My Zhu family will definitely make a longevity tablet for Spiritual Master Xiao and worship him sooner or later," the old woman of the Zhu family says very gratefully. Xiao Hua doesn't know what a longevity tablet is and only thinks that she is being polite. He smiles and waves his hand. "Elder has already given I a reward. There's no need to do this kind of thing." Soon after, Xiao Hua asked for the exact time and bade farewell to the old woman and her family. Under Fan Riguan's lead, they left the town and returned to the lakeside. Just as Fan Riguan had said, they arrived at the lakeside and before the great formation that blocked the secular world. Fan Riguan carefully took out a crude yellow talisman from his bosom and stuck it on the surface. The yellow talisman immediately began to burn. However, the light screen did not change at all because the yellow talisman had turned to ash. Just as Xiao Hua was frowning, a figure rushed along the light screen and stopped at the place where the yellow talisman was burning. This person was rather young. He looked at Fan Riguan and asked, "Is this your immortal talisman?" "Yes, it is this little one. This little one is the waiter of the Flying Fish Inn. I'm returning to the Flying Fish Inn today," Fan Riguan says very respectfully with a salute. "En." The young man waves his hand and the light screen dimmed. He says, "Go on." After Fan Riguan passes, the young man doesn't seem to care about Xiao Hua. His figure flashes and disappears. When Xiao Hua saw that the other party was ignoring him, he didn't even need to use the words he had prepared. He shrugged slightly and walked through the light shield. The light shield was also strange. When Xiao Hua walked through it, it actually stirred up the Fa Li in Xiao Hua's body. When the light shield sensed the Fa Li, it immediately stopped moving. Just like when he came, Xiao Hua used a mid-grade spirit stone to start the shuttle again. However, when he returns this time, it is very calm and didn't encounter any storms. After getting off the shuttle, Fan Riguan still wants to invite Xiao Hua to the Flying Fish Inn, but Xiao Hua shakes his head and says, Jen, I's cultivation is shallow. You probably don't know. The matter of the pills is what I told you before. Don't say a word more. Otherwise, not only you, even I will be killed. If you think about your wife and daughter, you should know what to do. Don't worry, Daoist Xiao. This little one's mother has already warned me countless times. This little one naturally knows what to do. Fan Riguan says respectfully. That's good. I am a loose cultivator. Others can't find I's trace. You should take care of your own safety. Xiao Hua smiles and turns around to leave. Plop Fan Riguan kneels on the ground and yells, Daoist Xiao. Although this little one is a mortal of the secular world, I also know how to be grateful. Daoist Xiao's grace to this little one's family, this little one will never forget. I only hate this little one's weak strength. I hope that in the future, this little one will have the opportunity to repay Daoist Xiao's kindness. We'll meet again if fate wills it. Xiao Hua lets out a long laugh and walks away. His shadow is extremely long under the sunlight. Fan Riguan kneels on the ground, his eyes are filled with gratitude and reverence. Xiao Hua has a smile on his face. He doesn't turn his head and doesn't distinguish the direction. He just casually walks forward. Although Fan Riguan's family is the descendant of a cultivator family, they have already declined. It's already not easy for them to live the life of an ordinary person. Xiao Hua absolutely doesn't think that they can repay him in any way. Of course, Xiao Hua doesn't have too much time to think about this so-called scroll that contains a great secret. Because right now, he has to face the problem of how to be a good loose cultivator, how to be a qualified loose cultivator, how to survive in this world of cultivators. Of course, he still enjoys the gratitude of Fan Riguan's family. He likes the feeling of being thanked. After the time it takes to smoke a cigarette, Xiao Hua casually finds an inn on the side of the road. It can be considered as another place to stay. This inn's facade is quite big. It's obviously higher class than the Flying Fish Inn. Of course, the inn's price is also not cheap. It costs 20 low-grade spirit stones per night. Naturally, Xiao Hua doesn't agree. After bargaining for a while, Xiao Hua spares them 3 spirit stones. Xiao Hua takes out 17 low-grade spirit stones and gets a room. Similarly, a waiter escorted Xiao Hua to his room before respectfully withdrawing. Needless to say, the room is quite big. Xiao Hua even feels that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth here is a bit more than the Flying Fish Inn. After he activates the restriction of the room, he sits down cross-legged. He touches his ear and takes out the 100 high-grade talisman papers that the refining charm school gave him. He takes a closer look. Sure enough, the talisman papers are very different from the low-grade talisman papers from before. Not only does it feel to the touch, but the fine runes on the talisman papers are smooth and natural. Because Xiao Hua's talisman ink has been used up, if he wants to refine yellow talismans, he will have to buy them from outside. Therefore, Xiao Hua thinks for a while and puts the talisman papers into the space. He sits down cross-legged with his palms facing the sky. On one hand, he silently circulates the Death Flower Heart Sutra. On the other hand, he immerses his mind into the space. Just like last night at Jingfanchi, his mind is infinitely enlarged. Time slowly passed, and when night fell, the reverse light within Xiao Hua's mind space still stopped. A mysterious fluctuation spread out in all directions with Xiao Hua's body as the center. Moreover, because Xiao Hua's mind was comprehending the heavenly Tao, this fluctuation contained a trace of the heavenly Tao's aura. In that endless night sky, there were many different kinds of starlight shining down, wrapping around Xiao Hua. Even more starlight seeped into Xiao Hua's skin, meridians, and bones. Xiao Hua spends the whole night cultivating. He only gets up when the sun is high up in the sky. He checks his body with great satisfaction, takes off the yellow talisman and walks out of the room. He asks the waiter about the location of Yiji and then walks out of the inn. The location of Yiji is a bit off. It is located in the innermost part of the southwest corner of Jingbo City. Xiao Hua walks for about an hour before he arrives. However, the road is very direct. Xiao Hua is not worried that he can't find the way back to the inn. When Xiao Hua leaves the inn, there are not many cultivators on the street. When he gets closer to Yiji, the number of cultivators he sees increases. In particular, there are several qi condensation cultivators around Xiao Hua. They are all walking in the direction of Yiji. Xiao Hua understands in his heart that not all of them are going to Yiji. Sure enough, they are the same as Xiao Hua. They walk in front of Yiji and stop. In front of Xiao Hua is a very huge square. At a glance, it has a radius of thousands of feet. Although it is not noon yet, there are already many people gathered in the square. Xiao Hua can't see the depths of the square, but in front of Xiao Hua, there are many cultivators sitting cross-legged. In front of these cultivators, there are some things placed in front of them, just like the stalls in the secular world. -5. Chapter 13:18. This Yiji's plaza was next to the lake. When Xiao Hua arrived, there were many shuttles coming over from the water. On the shuttles, there were cultivators wearing the same clothes. They must be from the same sect. Xiao Hua carefully looked at everything in the plaza. After all, this was his first time coming to Yiji, so he was quite excited. Of course, at the same time, he was also nervous. Because there were many things he didn't know, he was afraid of exposing himself. He looked at the cultivators who came from the same direction as him. Some swaggered, ignoring everything else, and directly entered Yiji. Some were like Xiao Hua, standing slightly and looking around for a moment. They took out a cloak from their storage pouch and skillfully put it on, covering their faces. Hey! This is a good idea, why didn't I think of it? Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. He knew that these people often came to Yiji. Then, he thought, forget it, it's my first time coming here. I'll take a look first. If there's any talisman ink or something like that, I'll buy some with spirit stones. I won't think about the rest for now. After making up his mind, Xiao Hua calmed down and walked towards the square. Before he could reach the edge of the square, he heard a voice shouting from the side of the square's entrance, "MI, cheap MI, only 10 high-grade spirit stones, 10 high-grade spirit stones? Why is it so cheap?" When Xiao Hua heard this, his eyes lit up. He quickened his pace and ran towards the source of the voice. Unfortunately, he was far from the only one who heard this. By the time he arrived, that stall was already surrounded by many cultivators. Xiao Hua was somewhat anxious, but all the cultivators in front of him had cultivation levels higher than his, so he didn't dare to carelessly squeeze in. "Ayo, you, how could you possibly be a mystic insect?" A shrill voice rang out. It was a female cultivator about 25 or 26 years old who had squeezed to the front of the stall. She was currently draping an extremely beautiful camouflage over her shoulders. She asked in astonishment, "You're completely useless in the camouflage." Behind the stall was a young cultivator around the age of 17 or 18, about the same age as Xiao Hua. His appearance was extremely fair, and his eyes were rolling around randomly. He appeared to be exceptionally quick-witted. The young cultivator was all smiles as he said, "Fellow Deity, this camouflage cloth isn't suitable for you. Think about it, if you wear this camouflage cloth of mine, wouldn't your appearance that outshines the moon and puts flowers to shame be covered by it?" When the female cultivator heard this, she couldn't help but blush. "Don't be so glib-tongued. Your mystique seems to only be able to cover your face. It can't even conceal your cultivation base. How can it be called a mystique? Not to mention 10 high-grade spirit stones, in I's opinion, even a single high-grade spirit stone is not worth it." An old cultivator next to the female cultivator frowned and scolded. "Fellow Deity, it's obvious that you're an itinerant cultivator who's experienced a lot. You're truly worthy of I's admiration. To tell the truth, what fellow Deity is talking about is a mystique. However, this mystique isn't the same. The 7 possibilities sect's mystique can conceal everything from a cultivator and has many uses. However, not all mystiques in the world have the same function as the 7 possibilities sect's mystique." The young cultivator didn't show the slightest bit of fear and said with a matter-of-fact tone, "Some mystiques can't conceal a cultivator's cultivation base and can only change it. Naturally, changing it to a higher level is impossible. In fact, fellow Taoists, think about it again. Even if we chi condensation cultivators wear a genuine mystique, a golden core or nascent soul cultivator would still be able to see through our true appearance. Rather than that, if you wear a genuine mystique and spend several tens or hundreds of top-grade spirit stones, wouldn't you only be able to deceive a foundation establishment cultivator? Fellow Taoists, think about it again. Are you willing to pay such a large price for a genuine 7 possibilities sect's mystique? Nonsense. If I had that many spirit stones, I would have already gone to the city's north. Why would I still be wandering around here?" A burly cultivator sneered. "Fellow Deity, looking at your cultivation base, going to the city's north is only a matter of time. There's no need to rush. Listen to I first." The young cultivator cupped his fists and said with a smile, "If fellow Deity doesn't have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of upper-grade spirit stones, and only spends a few hundred upper-grade spirit stones to buy an ordinary bewildering pill, which can only lower fellow Deity's cultivation base, then what can it be? Apart from chi condensation, isn't it still chi condensation? What's the difference between wearing a mystique or not?" Xiao Hua immediately understood the young cultivator's words. Indeed, the 7 possibilities sect's mystique didn't have any meaning to Xiao Hua. Perhaps a foundation establishment cultivator would be able to see through his true appearance. What was the difference between it and a normal cloak? Ha ha ha, no wonder your mystique is so cheap. It's basically the same as a cloak. The burly cultivator laughed and sneered. "If what you said is true, then I only need to buy a cloak with a low-grade spirit stone and it'll cover my face. What's the use of your mystique to cover my face?" With that, the cultivator threw the bewildering insect in front of the young cultivator and left. Everyone laughed when they heard this and immediately dispersed. Only the female cultivator at the front still held the bewildering insect in her hand and hesitated. "Fellow Deity, you really have a discerning eye. Where are you going to find this kind of thing? If you don't want to regret it, then you should make a move now," the young cultivator hurriedly said. "But..." The female cultivator pursed her lips and said, "I also have a cloak. I only see that your mystique looks pretty. Whether or not it can cover my face, I don't care." Ah! At this time, Xiao Hua had already arrived in front of them. Hearing this, he couldn't help but bitterly smile in his heart. He thought of the peacock fantasy that Xiao Shenrue bought at the market. Wasn't it because it was pretty? Alas, this female cultivator really isn't a male cultivator, Xiao Hua sighed and secretly said in his heart. But soon after, he laughed even more hoarsely. These words aren't generally correct. "Fellow Deity, if you really like it, forget it. Today is the first time Yi Ji has opened, so I'll spare you 3 spirit stones. It's only 7 high-grade spirit stones. What do you think?" The young cultivator's face was resolute, as if he was cutting off meat from his body. "This." The female cultivator bit her lip. Her face was still filled with disappointment. She was just about to put the mystique in her hand on the ground. Forget it. Since fellow Daoist likes it so much, alas, if it weren't for the strict order of my sect, what harm would there be in giving this mystique to fellow Daoist? As the ancient saying goes, treasured swords are given to heroes, red makeup goes with beauties. This mystique is exactly what fellow Daoist should wear. I'll give you 5 high-grade spirit stones. How about it? The young cultivator's face was slightly pale. It seemed that he really had reached his bottom line. Hehe, that's what you said. The female cultivator chuckled. She quickly slapped her storage pouch and took out 5 high-grade spirit stones. She handed them over to the young cultivator, turned around, and left. Alas, Tilda, the young cultivator sighed helplessly and shook his head. His eyes were filled with helplessness. In just a moment, the young cultivator raised his head. When he saw Xiao Hua walk to the front of the stall, his expression immediately changed. He was full of smiles as he picked up the mystique in front of him and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, I can tell at a glance that you're a person of great stature. A rogue cultivator like you is the easiest to target. If it weren't for that mystique covering your face, you wouldn't even be bothered by a female cultivator who wants to dual cultivate with you." When Xiao Hua heard this, he smiled bitterly. He also wanted to take a look, so he unconsciously reached out to take it. Fellow Daoist's eyes are indeed sharp. You really know what's good for you. Just based on fellow Daoist's flattery, there's no need to say anything else. That fellow Daoist just now offered 7 spirit stones, so I will give fellow Daoist some benefits. Only 6 high-grade spirit stones. What do you think? Xiao Hua held the so-called mystique in his hand and carefully examined it. This mystique was made from an unknown material and was very light. However, apart from some talisman characters on the hood, there was no difference from an ordinary Daoist robe. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua smiled and said, "I wonder, which sect fellow Daoist is from?" Fellow Daoist is noisy. If you want to buy it, then name a price. If it's suitable, I will give it to you. Why, try to curry favor with I. In any case, I am not a rogue cultivator and have no relationship with you. The young cultivator frowned and replied with extreme displeasure. His face was full of vigilance. Sigh, since fellow Daoist knows that I am a rogue cultivator, how can I afford 6 high-grade spirit stones? Xiao Hua said with a smile. The young cultivator glanced at Xiao Hua and said, "Actually, fellow Daoist, I'll say something unpleasant. With fellow Daoist's cultivation, I think you don't need to buy this mystique. Even if you cover your face, with such a low cultivation, you'll only make it more conspicuous. You might as well save up some spirit stones and buy a defensive Daoist robe. This is the right way, this." Xiao Hua's face was slightly red. He pointed at the mystique at the side and said, "Actually, I will also tell you the truth. The style of this mystique is much better than a Daoist robe. I like it very much." The young cultivator's face was full of resentment. He picked up the mystique and threw it to Xiao Hua. He sneered and said, "Since fellow Daoist is so vain, I will fulfill your wish. If someone else buys this mystique, it will cost at least 6 spirit stones. If fellow Daoist wants it, then take 5. Sigh, forget it, just take 3 high-grade spirit stones." Then, he muttered in a low voice, "I'm afraid, you can't even take out 3. "Sure enough," Xiao Hua muttered, "fellow Daoist, don't tell me you really don't have 3 high-grade spirit stones." The young cultivator stared blankly and said angrily, "Fellow Daoist, 3 spirit stones is I's lowest price. I have worked hard for more than a month. You can't let I work hard for nothing." When Xiao Hua heard this, he raised his eyebrows and somewhat understood. "Oh, these 3 spirit stones are the lowest price given by my sect. I see that fellow Daoist really wants it, and looking at your cultivation, you really can't take out the spirit stones of my sect. That's why I said it. I really can't reduce it anymore." The young cultivator hurriedly said, "High-grade spirit stones? I don't have them. I wonder what fellow Daoist is willing to exchange?" Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Sigh, if you don't have spirit stones, what good things can you have? The young cultivator waved his hand and said with a sigh, "Forget it, looking at your cultivation. Sigh, I was also in dire straits like you in the past. I won't say anything to you. Take out all the spirit stones you have, and I will give this mystique to you." After the young cultivator finished speaking, he stared at Xiao Hua. It was quite thought-provoking. How could Xiao Hua take advantage of this? Although he didn't know why the young cultivator was staring at him, he only shook his head and said, "You just need to say what you want. If I have it, I will naturally take it out. If not, I will turn around and leave." The young cultivator nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist indeed, has some character. It's not out of I's expectations. Firm and straightforward people are easily broken. This shouldn't be the character of a loose cultivator." Soon after, he looked around and saw that there weren't any cultivators. He said with a smile, "You can take this mystique. Although this mystique is worth 3 high-grade spirit stones, it's still something I personally made. Giving it to you is nothing." "You really want to give it to me?" Xiao Hua was stunned. The young cultivator's attitude was completely different from before. He didn't understand the young cultivator's meaning. "Hihi, take it. In the past, when I was your age, my cultivation wasn't high, and I suffered humiliation. Now that I see you, I think of myself in the past. This mystique is only worth 3 spirit stones in I's eyes. If it can be of greater use to you, even if I don't want these 3 spirit stones, I'll still be gratified in my heart," the young cultivator said sincerely. These words were somewhat familiar to Xiao Hua's ears. Wasn't this what he said to Fan Riguan's family? A top-grade parasol pill only had healing and commemorative significance to him, but to Zhu Shi and the others, it was a perfect life and a fresh life. Similarly, this mystique was worth 3 high-grade spirit stones to the young cultivator, but to him, a loose cultivator who was only at the 2nd layer of the Qi refining realm, it might be a life. Although there is mutual deception in the cultivation world, although there is the law of the jungle, there are still people who sympathize with the weak and help the weak. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. Thus, Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Many thanks, fellow Daoist. In fact, I don't have any spirit stones, but I do have some fireball talismans. I don't know if fellow Daoist needs them." "Fireball talismans?" The young cultivator didn't frown and immediately nodded. That's fine. If fellow Daoist has the heart to give them, then give them to me at the price." "Okay." Xiao Hua nodded and looked left and right. He clapped his hands and took out 4 fireball talismans, handing them over to the young cultivator. When the young cultivator saw the 4 fireball talismans, he said with a smile, "I appreciate fellow Daoist's kindness, but these fireball talismans, high grade." When he took them in his hands and was about to decline, he suddenly recognized them and looked at Xiao Hua in shock. He then looked around and put the fireball talismans into his storage pouch first, saying in a low voice, "Fellow Daoist, don't you need them to protect you? Even if you want to change them, it's better to change into some defensive Daoist robes." Xiao Hua smiled but didn't say anything. Since it's like this, I'll accept them." The young cultivator didn't say much and said again, "I meet the requirements. How should I address fellow Daoist?" Xiao Hua greets fellow Daoist Fu." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and saluted. "Hihi, fellow Daoist Xiao is too polite," Jiyu Ying said with a smile. He still wanted to say something, but another person came over. Jiyu Ying immediately called out loudly, "Fellow Daoist, quickly come over and take a look. Cheap and good bewitching Yong. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Com to vote for it. -5. Chapter 13:19. Xiao Hua laughed and turned to leave the stall. He shook the camouflage garment and was about to put it on when a voice came from behind him. Who would target you with this kind of cultivation? Even if they killed you, would they be able to take out top-grade spirit stones from your storage pouch?" Xiao Hua stared blankly. This seems to be talking about me, right?" Xiao Hua was very puzzled. When he turned around and looked carefully, he couldn't help but be stunned. This person, he knew him. It couldn't be said that he knew him. A few days ago, when he entered Jingbua City, he saw him outside the city. It was Xuanyan School's 10-year-old disciple. That day, because Xiao Hua looked at him too much, he was glared back. Now, he didn't even look at him, but he was actually despised by him. Xiao Hua was somewhat angry, and he sneered, "I admit that my cultivation is shallow, but can't I wear camouflage garment to cover my face? Besides, what does I wear camouflage garment or not have to do with you? What does it have to do with me?" The boy's face was rather arrogant, and he snorted coldly, "It's not your fault that your cultivation is shallow, but it's your fault that you come out and let people mock you." "You!" Xiao Hua was furious. He raised his eyes and looked left and right, but he didn't see this boy's martial brothers, and he also didn't see the boy's 11th layer aura refining teacher. "What are you looking at?" "Looking for help." Ph. Loose cultivators are loose cultivators. When they see someone alone, they want to attack. Truly, a dog can't change its habit of eating shit. I was just walking here and casually said a few words. I didn't say it was you, so why are you looking for a scolding? The boy was rather eloquent, and his words made Xiao Hua stare blankly. Thinking carefully, he indeed didn't mention anything about camouflage garment, nor did he mention anything about Xiao Hua. He really did admit it himself. Xiao Hua's face was very unsightly. He put on the camouflage garment, ignored the boy, and turned to leave. The boy's eyebrows rose, showing an expression completely different from an ordinary boy's, and he still unhurriedly walked inside Yi Bazaar. "Unlucky, unlucky," Xiao Hua muttered to himself as he walked. "This disciple of a large sect, how do they teach him? So what if he was a loose cultivator? There are good and bad rogue cultivators. Ph. The famous sects are all sanctimonious. I don't know about the others, but the 100 Herbs clan is definitely not a good thing." Just as Xiao Hua was thinking, a stall appeared before his eyes. Two men around the 5th level of qi refining were coldly sitting behind the stall with their eyes closed and not speaking. The stall was filled with talisman brushes, talisman ink, talisman paper, and other items. Upon seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't continue to curse those famous schools and sects in his heart. He walked to the front of the stall, picked up the talisman paper and carefully examined it. The quality of the talisman paper was ordinary, slightly worse than the mid-grade talisman paper of the refining talisman school. Looking at the talisman ink and other items, they were also the same. Immediately after, Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, how much are these items priced?" At this moment, Xiao Hua's body was covered in a camouflage cloth, so the two cultivators couldn't see his true cultivation level. One of them opened his eyes, swept a glance at him, and stated the price. Hearing this, Xiao Hua nodded his head. The price of this talisman paper was actually about the same as the low-grade talisman paper of the refining talisman school. It was indeed cheap. Xiao Hua glanced at the surroundings and said in a low voice, "Fellow Daoist, may I ask if there's any high-grade talisman ink here?" "High-grade talisman ink?" That cultivator's expression didn't change, and he said with self-mockery, "Fellow Daoist, take a look at I's cultivation level. How can I craft high-grade talisman ink?" Xiao Hua blushed with shame and said embarrassedly, "I was negligent, please don't blame me, fellow Daoist." The other person opened his eyes and said, "It's fine, we're rogue cultivators. These are all carefully crafted by ourselves. If fellow Daoist takes a fancy to it, feel free to choose. If there's nothing to your liking, please go to the side and take a look. This fellow Daoist's talisman ink, how much is it?" When Xiao Hua heard that they were rogue cultivators, he felt a bit closer in his heart and asked. After hearing the other party's price, Xiao Hua inwardly nodded and said with a smile, "I don't have any spirit stones, only some fireball talismans. Would fellow Daoist like to take a look?" When they heard it was fireball talismans, the two people's faces were filled with disappointment. They shook their heads and said, "I can craft low-grade yellow talismans like fireball talismans, so I don't lack them. If fellow Daoist has some Vajra talismans, strength talismans, or other rare yellow talismans for defense, then I can consider it. So it's like that." Xiao Hua muttered to himself for a moment, then said in a low voice, "I have some ordinary spirit herbs here, but they're relatively old. Would fellow Taoists be interested?" "Old?" The two people's eyes unconsciously lit up when they heard this. They also looked left and right, then said in a low voice, "Roughly how old?" "Around 200 years. "What? Around 200 years? One of the rogue cultivators spat out. Soon after, he was glared at by the other person and hurriedly covered his mouth. The other person couldn't conceal his excitement and said in a low voice, "Fellow Daoist, please tell us, what spirit herb is it?" Xiao Hua said with a smile, "It's nothing but blood exhaustion grass, broken bellwood, and the like, extremely ordinary." Fellow Daoist, you're really almighty. These extremely ordinary spirit herbs can actually be so old. Alas, what a pity. One person sighed with emotion. If exquisite grass, Xiao Hua interrupted that person's words without the slightest hesitation. "Fellow Daoist, if I had 200-year-old exquisite grass, would I still be standing here?" That person smiled and nodded. He glanced at the other person and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist, although this spirit herb is ordinary, it's superior in age. If it's too much, of course it's not too much." Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out the spirit herbs he'd prepared long ago from his storage pouch, handing them over. Not bad. Although it's less than 200 years old, it's not too far off." That person took it, looked at it, and said with a smile, "A 200-year-old main ingredient is naturally worth 10 mid-grade spirit stones. However, this ordinary spirit grass is only worth 6 or 7 mid-grade spirit stones. If fellow Daoist agrees, then this poor Daoist will give fellow Daoist the corresponding talisman ink." Sure. Xiao Hua didn't know the specific exchange amount. There were plenty of 200-year-old spirit herbs in his space, so he didn't care too much. Seeing that Xiao Hua was very forthright, the two rogue cultivators were also very happy. They handed the corresponding talisman ink to Xiao Hua and let him put it away in his storage pouch. Soon after, Xiao Hua took out some talisman paper and a very ordinary-looking talisman brush. "Fellow Daoist, please take care." Seeing that Xiao Hua had put away everything, the two were preparing to close their eyes again. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment, then cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoists, I still have something I want to ask." "What is it?" "Just now, you two fellow Taoists said that you can make fireball talismans. Then, may I ask, are you willing to part with the method of making other yellow talismans?" Xiao Hua probed. Fellow Daoist. Yellow talismans are easy to find, but making talismans is difficult. Even the method of making fireball talismans is hard to find. You still want the method of making other yellow talismans? One of them said with a fake smile. "Yes, I have the method of making icicle talismans here. If fellow Daoist wants it, you can exchange it with a 300-year-old exquisite grass." The other one directly said. "Ari, then. I will take my leave." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and whispered, "I still haven't seen what exquisite grass looks like." Xiao Hua left the stall and walked for a moment. At this time, he had already bought all the materials needed to make talismans. He also knew that the method of making talismans wasn't something that could be easily exchanged, so he extinguished his thoughts and only walked around with his eyes. Sure enough, this Yi was filled with all kinds of strange things. Anything used by cultivators could be found here. There were many extremely strange things that Xiao Hua had never seen before, he had never even heard of. This is. While Xiao Hua was looking around with great interest, he saw a dozen or so cultivators surrounding a stall in front of him. Thus, he quickly walked over. This stall was the same as the stall where he exchanged for talisman ink just now. It was all about making talismans, and behind the stall was a cultivator wearing a cloak. Judging from the style of her Daoist robe, she should be a female cultivator. When Xiao Hua saw what was written on the stall, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His heart was somewhat restless. On the stall, it was written, "Incomplete method of making confinement talismans in exchange for 10 Peiyuan pill." Confinement talismans were high-level yellow talismans. They were far from low-level offensive yellow talismans like fireball talismans. If it was like what the two rogue cultivators said just now, the method of making confinement talismans was far from being comparable to 10 Peiyuan pill. Yes, it's incomplete. I just don't know how it's incomplete. Xiao Hua slightly frowned. At this time, he heard a female cultivator in front of him softly ask, "Fellow Daoist, where exactly is your method of making confinement talismans incomplete? Fellow Daoist, do you have 10 Peiyuan pill? If you do, please take it out and show it to me. I will naturally tell you." Although the corners of the female cultivator's mouth were smiling, her tone wasn't gentle at all. The female cultivator who asked the question was given the cold shoulder. She shook her head, turned around, and walked away. 10 Peiyuan pill isn't a small number. This fellow Daoist didn't even say where the method of making confinement talismans is incomplete. Who would want to exchange with her? The nearby cultivators all discussed in low voices. "Fellow Daoist, I have a Peiyuan pill here, but I don't know, where is the flaw in your method of making confinement talismans?" A cultivator around the 6th level of Qi refining who didn't conceal his cultivation stepped out from the crowd and asked with a smile. "Hihi, fellow Daoist, please take out the Peiyuan pill first." The female cultivator who was only at the 5th level of Qi refining still said with a smile. "Fellow Daoist, please inspect it." The male cultivator clapped his hands and took out a jade bottle from his storage pouch, handing it over to the female cultivator. After the female cultivator inspected it, she smiled and said, "It really is a Peiyuan pill. Fellow Daoist, please take care of it." As she spoke, she picked up a yellow talisman from her stall and activated it with her magic power. Instantly, the voices of the two cultivators disappeared. Xiao Hua, who was standing behind them, saw the two of them talking back and forth. The male cultivator's expression gradually became unsightly. However, after a short while, he turned around and walked away, no longer paying attention to them. The direction that the male cultivator was walking in happened to be next to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua and the cultivator next to him all heard their conversation clearly. They're really going too far. What incomplete method of making confinement talismans? There's simply no method to inscribe talismans. This confinement talisman simply can't be made. How can it be worth 10 Peiyuan pill? -5. Chapter 1320. After hearing that male cultivator's words, the cultivators who were watching the excitement from the side all looked as if they'd woken up from a dream. They all carried resentment and dispersed in a hubbub. Only Xiao Hua, who was at the side, was somewhat baffled by what he heard. Seeing that everyone had dispersed, Xiao Hua hurriedly pulled an old man who was walking past him, bowed, and asked, "Senior, please wait. Junior has something to ask." That old man was already around the 7th level of Qi refining. He raised his eyes to look at Xiao Hua and nodded, "Fellow Daoist, please speak." Xiao Hua asked, "Junior doesn't understand what that fellow Daoist just said about this incomplete confinement talisman. Senior, please enlighten me." "Oh, this." That old man pursed his lips and smiled. "Fellow Daoist is a loose cultivator, right?" "That's right." Xiao Hua nodded and said, "That's why Junior isn't very clear about this talisman crafting technique. Please give me some pointers." It can't be considered pointers. Fellow Daoist should know that this confinement talisman is a high-grade yellow talisman, right? Junior knows. Moreover, Junior also knows a bit about the talisman crafting technique, but I've never heard of any writing technique. Xiao Hua explained. The talisman crafting technique fellow Daoist knows must be the talisman crafting technique of low-grade yellow talismans. Xiao Hua didn't deny it and said with a smile, "That's right. Junior is a loose cultivator. How could I possibly know the talisman crafting technique of high-grade yellow talismans? It's not like loose cultivators definitely don't know the talisman crafting technique of high-grade yellow talismans," that old man said with a smile. "One of the differences between crafting high-grade yellow talismans, middle-grade yellow talismans, and low-grade yellow talismans is that high-grade yellow talismans must have a writing technique." "Why is that? Why can't low-grade and middle-grade yellow talismans be used?" Xiao Hua had an appearance of thirst for knowledge. He originally didn't have to say this, but what if he did? The old man felt a sense of satisfaction in his heart as he smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist, this kind of thing is very complicated. Only when teaching yellow talismans would a teacher explain it in detail. Since you are so eager to learn, I will explain it simply. Soon after, he pointed at the female cultivator and said, the reason why her confinement talisman is a high-grade yellow talisman is because the talisman characters used to refine it are extremely complicated. It is far from being comparable to low-grade yellow talismans like fireball talismans and icicle talismans. I presume fellow Daoist has also tried out icicle talismans. You only need to carefully memorize those talismans and then use a talisman brush to write the talisman characters onto the talisman paper within a certain amount of time. There is no need for any writing method. However, the talisman characters of this high-grade yellow talisman are very complicated. If the talisman characters drawn with talisman ink cannot be completely written onto the talisman paper within a certain amount of time, the talisman ink will not be able to confine the magic power and spiritual energy within the talisman characters. The magic power and spiritual energy will dissipate into the air. Therefore, every high-grade yellow talisman has a special writing method to guarantee that you can completely write the talisman characters of this high-grade yellow talisman onto the talisman paper within a certain amount of time. Ah! There is such a thing. Xiao Hua's heart was wild with joy when he heard this, but his mouth turned pale with fright. Senior is saying that this female fellow Daoist's talisman crafting method, isn't it not worth a single low-grade spirit stone? Hehe, you can't say it like that. If someone knew the writing method of the confinement talisman, wouldn't this talisman crafting method be able to be used? After all, it's a high-grade yellow talisman crafting method. 10 peiyuan pills can't be considered expensive. But, since someone knew the writing method of the confinement talisman, they naturally also knew the refining method of the confinement talisman. Would they still spend 10 peiyuan pills for this incomplete refining method? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Ha ha ha, of course, I didn't think of this. The old man laughed loudly, cupped his hands, and quickly walked away. After the old man left, Xiao Hua looked at the female cultivator's stall and slowly walked closer. Although the group of cultivators from before had already dispersed, the confinement talisman was indeed attractive. Not long after, a group of cultivators gathered again. Just like before, there were also people who went forward to inquire. When they found out the real reason, everyone dispersed again. After a few rounds of this, the female cultivator had already destroyed several silence talismans. She was clearly somewhat impatient. When the last group of people dispersed, she erased the word. As expected, the number of people coming to her stall decreased by a lot. Xiao Hua had been standing at the side quietly observing. Seeing that there were fewer people, he walked forward. Without waiting for him to cup his hands and salute, the female cultivator sneered and said, "Fellow Daoist has been watching for a long time. Could it be that you're interested in the refining method I have?" Xiao Hua was stunned. He didn't expect that he would still be noticed. He could only say embarrassedly, "Fellow Daoist knows that I am indeed interested. Then why didn't fellow Daoist come forward earlier? I don't have the peiyuan pill that fellow Daoist is talking about. Of course I don't dare to come forward," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Oh. Since you don't have the peiyuan pill, if you come forward now, I won't exchange it with you." The female cultivator frowned and said in confusion, "Fellow Daoist, please use the silence talisman. I will tell fellow Daoist in detail." "You have something else?" the female cultivator asked. "Yes." Xiao Hua nodded. "Marrow cleansing pill? I don't want that." The female cultivator shook her head. No. Xiao Hua also shook his head. "Fellow Daoist, don't guess. Okay, I hope you won't make I waste another silence talisman." The female cultivator sighed and used the silence talisman. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and said inwardly, "What silence talisman are you wasting? Others already know that your refining method is incomplete. Wouldn't you be burying your head in the sand by doing this?" Seeing the female cultivator use the silence talisman, Xiao Hua said with a smile, "I don't have the peiyuan pill, but I do have the absorption fruit and black tusk grass. I don't know if fellow Daoist is interested." "Ari, I was wondering what it was. So it's the absorption fruit and black tusk grass. Fellow Daoist, you must be tired. I wasted a silence talisman. The female cultivator sighed and said, I do have the absorption fruit and black tusk grass. I just don't know how to refine pills. That's why I came to Jingbua City's Yiji to exchange my talisman refining method for the Peiyuan pill. This. Xiao Hua was also disappointed. However, he still didn't want to give up and asked, then, how old is your absorption fruit? Naturally, it's 30 years old. Is there even a need to ask? The female cultivator was stunned. If I had 100-year-old one, I would have already taken it to 10,000 Flowers Valley to ask Medicine Master Sui to refine it. Why would I need to come here? When Xiao Hua heard this, he was overjoyed. He said in a low voice, then what if I had 100-year-old absorption fruit and black tusk grass? Would fellow Daoist be willing to exchange? Ah! You really have them? When the female cultivator heard this, her face revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. I do have them. However, the quantity isn't much. I don't know how much fellow Daoist needs. Xiao Hua said calmly. 3 absorption fruits and 3 black tusk grass are enough to refine 10 Peiyuan pill. Adding 1 more absorption fruit and asking Medicine Master Sui to refine it should be possible. The female cultivator calculated for a moment and asked very nervously, I don't know if fellow Daoist has them. This. Xiao Hua sighed and shook his head. I only have 2 absorption fruits and 2 black tusk grass. Before he finished speaking, the female cultivator was extremely disappointed. 2 can't refine 10 Peiyuan pill. Xiao Hua smiled and said, however, this poor Daoist's 2 kinds of spiritual herbs are both around 200 years old. If fellow Daoist were to give them to 10,000 Flower Valley's Medicine Master Sui, perhaps you would be able to obtain 10 essence nurturing pills? Ah! Are they really 200 years old? The female cultivator was immediately pleasantly surprised. If it's really like this, Medicine Master Sui can make an exception. Fellow Daoist, please take a look. Xiao Hua took out a jade bottle. When the female cultivator saw it, she repeatedly nodded and said happily, fellow Daoist is right. It's exactly 200 years old. As she spoke, she slapped her storage pouch and took out a booklet. She smiled and said, fellow Daoist, please take a look. I's refining method for this confinement talisman is missing the method to inscribe the talisman. Xiao Hua took it and cautiously looked at it. He also said, fellow Daoist's words aren't wrong. Then, fellow Daoist, are you willing to exchange? At this time, it was the female cultivator's turn to be uneasy. Of course, fellow Daoist, please take good care of it. Xiao Hua smiled and slapped his storage pouch, taking out the remaining essence-absorbing fruit and black tusk grass. Soon after, he put the confinement talisman booklet into his storage pouch. Very good. They're all of full medicinal age. The female cultivator put the spiritual herbs into her storage pouch and cupped her hands. Thank you for your help, fellow Daoist. No matter. You're good, I'm good too. Xiao Hua beamed and said. Soon after, he said casually, I wonder if fellow Daoist has the method to refine icicle talismans. When the female cultivator heard this, she smiled and said, I indeed have the method to refine icicle talismans. However, I don't have anything I want to exchange. If fellow Daoist has 100 high-grade spirit stones or something like a foundation establishment pill, I can still consider it. Xiao Hua smiled wryly and cupped his hands. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Farewell. Fellow Daoist, take care. The female cultivator cupped her hands and returned the courtesy. After obtaining the method to refine confinement talismans, Xiao Hua was quite happy. His method to refine yellow talismans was different from others. He didn't use any talisman brushes, so there was no so-called writing method. Of course, this was all his guess. Whether or not he was able to refine confinement talismans would have to wait until he returned to the inn. Xiao Hua walked for a while and saw many stalls. There were a lot of things on the stalls, and Xiao Hua also wanted them all. However, what he lacked the most were cultivation techniques, alchemy techniques, and talisman crafting techniques. And these, he simply didn't see any trace of them. Just as he was looking left and right, he saw an unremarkable stall. This stall was extremely small, only 1 square foot. The owner of the stall was about the same age as Xiao Hua, but his cultivation was at the 5th level of the qi refining realm. This cultivator wasn't tall and had a dark and rough appearance. He seemed to have very honest and considerate facial features, similar to Zhong Qingxiao's. This cultivator's stall had some spiritual herbs that were 10 years old. There weren't many of them, but the varieties were very complicated. Many of them were things that Xiao Hua had seen in books but had never seen before. Seeing these, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up and he quickly walked over. This stall was extremely cold and cheerless. The cultivator held a thick book in his hand and was reading it with great interest. He simply didn't notice Xiao Hua's arrival. "Fellow Daoist." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "Oh, fellow Daoist, these spiritual herbs are all 1 low-grade spirit stone each. If fellow Daoist fancies one, just put down the spirit stone and take the spiritual herb." The cultivator didn't even raise his head and said loudly, -5. Chapter 13:21. Ah, there's such an exchange. When Xiao Hua heard the cultivator's words, he couldn't help but smile. He cupped his hands and said, "Fellow cultivator, I have some things I want to talk to you about." The cultivator impatiently put down the book and pointed at the small stall. "Fellow Daoist, this poor Daoist has already said it clearly. This poor Daoist's spirit herbs are all here. If fellow Daoist wants them, then take the spirit stones. If not, then go somewhere else. Fellow Daoist must disturb this poor Daoist's cultivation. This is a great sin." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "What I need, your stall doesn't have, noisy. If you don't have it, then what the hell are you talking about? Just leave." As the cultivator spoke, he picked up the book again. This poor Daoist wants to discuss with fellow Daoist about buying some spirit grass seeds from fellow Daoist." Xiao Hua whispered his thoughts. "Buy seeds?" The cultivator was stunned. He immediately put down the book and showed a curious expression. "What do you want seeds for? Aren't the spiritual herbs I have enough for your needs?" When the cultivator said this, Xiao Hua was stunned. He said curiously, "Fellow cultivator, if you want to sell, then tell I that you can. If you don't want to sell, then tell I that you can't. Why do you care if I want to buy seeds?" Xiao Hua's words were very similar to what the cultivator said just now. Xiao Hua was prepared. As long as the cultivator turned hostile, he would turn around and leave. Yi Ji was so big, how could he worry about not being able to buy spiritual herb seeds? Strangely, when Xiao Hua said this, the cultivator laughed and cupped his hands. "I'm Ling Zhongyu of the Grass Spirit Sect. How should I address you?" Strange, this person's temper is really strange. When you talk to him nicely, he ignores you. When you scold him, he learns to be obedient. Xiao Hua thought to himself. He also cupped his hands and said, "I'm Xiao Hua. Oh, fellow cultivator Xiao, don't blame I for talking too much. I have been in Yi Ji for many years, but it's always people who come to buy spiritual herbs. I've never heard of anyone buying seeds, so I was curious." Ling Zhongyu said with a smile. "And after seeing your fake cultivation and your concealed cultivation, I feel that fellow cultivator Xiao's cultivation is about the same as mine. Maybe fellow cultivator Xiao and I are the same kind of people?" Xiao Hua was stunned. "Who? Haha, is there a need to say? If you want to buy seeds, what else can you do if you don't want to study spiritual herbs?" Ling Zhongyu picked up the book that was thrown aside and shook it. Xiao Hua saw clearly that there were 2 big words on it, Codex of Herbs. "Oh, this is good stuff." Xiao Hua's heart jumped. Then, he said, "Fellow cultivator, you're really the same kind of person." Sigh, because of spiritual herbs, I's cultivation was delayed. "Fellow cultivator, can you let I take a look at this Codex of Herbs?" "Of course." Ling Zhongyu carefully handed over the Codex of Herbs and said with a smile, "I am the same. Master said that if it weren't for the fact that I put too much effort into spiritual herbs, my cultivation could have increased by a few levels." Seeing that Ling Zhongyu handed over the Codex of Herbs without hesitation, Xiao Hua's heart was very warm. He casually flipped through it a few times. This is Fierce sungrass? He accidentally flipped to a fiery red spiritual herb that looked like fire. Xiao Hua frowned. A name jumped out from his mind. Fierce sungrass? This. Fierce sungrass should be called fierce sungrass, right? But I don't think I've seen the picture of this fierce sungrass in Shonghuaming. How do I know that it should be called fierce sungrass? Xiao Hua was surprised. He handed the codex of herbs over and asked, "Fellow cultivator Ling, this fierce sungrass. Is there another name called fierce sungrass?" "What? Another name?" Ling Zhongyu took the codex of herbs and casually glanced at it. He immediately denied it. Fierce sun grass doesn't have another name. Moreover, I have never heard of any fierce sun grass. Could it be, there's a fierce sun grass in your sect's ancient books? Speaking up to here, Ling Zhongyu's eyes were filled with fervor. Xiao Hua shook his head with a wry smile and said, "This poor Daoist only saw it from an incomplete page of a book. That page was lost long ago. Even if this poor Daoist wanted to give it to fellow Daoist, it was impossible. So it's like this. What else is on that page?" Ling Zhongyu asked in disappointment. Hearing this, the appearance and names of some spiritual herbs indeed appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. Something like dragon scale fruit, something like iron bonegrass, they were all strange spiritual herbs. Haha, they are all strange spiritual herbs. There are no records of them in the ordinary codex of herbs. Xiao Hua laughed. Sigh, what a pity. I can't take a look. Ling Zhongyu was rather disappointed. It seemed like he was really obsessed with studying spiritual herbs. By the way, fellow cultivator Ling, what do you plan to do about what I said just now? Xiao Hua changed the topic. Fellow cultivator, are you talking about seeds? Ling Zhongyu regained his senses and asked. Yes. I wonder if fellow cultivator is willing to part with them. Seeds of spiritual herbs. In other sects, such as the 10,000 Flower Valley or the 100 Herbs faction, they might not agree so easily. Even if they agree, I'm afraid they won't be able to find many seed. But for my grass spirit sect. It's nothing. My grass spirit sect specializes in growing spiritual herbs. Xiao Hua was overjoyed when he heard this. He cupped his hands and said, "Then fellow cultivator Ling, how do you want to exchange for these seeds? Do you want spirit stones? Or, do you want other things? Of course spirit stones are the best." Ling Zhongyu laughed. "If you don't have spirit stones, fellow cultivator Xiao's spiritual pills are also fine. How about 100-year-old spiritual herbs? Or middle-grade yellow talismans?" Xiao Hua hesitated and asked. Let's go with spirit stones and spiritual pills. My grass spirit sect doesn't lack anything else. Ling Zhongyu laughed. Then. Alright. Although Xiao Hua wanted to use high-grade fireball talismans to exchange for spirit stones, Ling Zhongyu didn't lack them. He could only use real middle-grade spirit stones to exchange. Perhaps it was because Xiao Hua also liked spirit grasses. The price Ling Zhongyu quoted was very cheap, far exceeding Xiao Hua's expectations. Xiao Hua was very satisfied, but when Xiao Hua was about to take out the spirit stones, he was stopped by Ling Zhongyu. "Fellow Daoist Xiao, this poor Daoist came to Yiji to sell spirit grasses. How could I bring these seeds? What this poor Daoist said to fellow Daoist today, I will report to Master when I return to the mountain. If nothing unexpected happens, I will be able to bring the seeds you need in 3 days. 3 days later. Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. However, after thinking for a while, he realized that Ling Zhongyu was right. Who would bring so many seeds for no reason? Then, since fellow cultivator wants to return to the mountain, I wonder, can you bring the seeds of your sect's spiritual herbs? Oh, or the seeds that can't germinate and are no longer used can be brought to I as well? Xiao Hua's words were somewhat exorbitant. Ling Zhongyu frowned. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, I can understand fellow cultivators' thoughts. When you see the grass spirit book, you only want to plant all the spiritual herbs recorded in it. Only then will you be satisfied. But I wonder if Master will agree. Then please put in a good word for me, fellow cultivator Ling. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "He, all right. Since I have agreed, I will do my best. Fellow cultivator, don't worry. Please come and get it in 3 days," Ling Zhongyu said with a smile. "Thank you for your help, fellow cultivator Ling." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and thanked him. After he took 2 steps, he stopped again with a hesitant expression. Ling Zhongyu had a good impression of Xiao Hua. Seeing him hesitate, he took the initiative and said with a smile, "Fellow cultivator Xiao, could it be that there's something wrong?" Xiao Hua looked at him and then looked around. After choosing his words, he asked, "Alas, fellow cultivator Ling, actually I also want to get some spiritual herbs for a living like your sect. But the spiritual herbs in Yiji, the price is really too low. It's not easy to make a living." After hearing this, Ling Zhongyu felt the same way. With a sympathetic look, he almost hugged Xiao Hua and said, "Fellow cultivator Xiao is right. Spiritual herbs that are decades old and centuries old are rare. But even so, they can't be compared to those yellow talismans and elixirs. It's because the techniques of refining elixirs and creating talismans are really secret techniques. Very few people know them. And planting spiritual herbs is simple. Who doesn't know how to do it? It's just a matter of whether the planting is good or bad. Even if they don't know how to do it, they can go to places with rich spiritual energy. Most of the time, they can find them. No wonder the price of spiritual herbs is so low. As the saying goes, skills have their own specialties. The rarer something is, the more valuable it is." Xiao Hua sighed. "Yes, exactly." Ling Zhongyu nodded. "How about, there are a lot fewer cultivators like you and me who study spiritual herbs." The two talked for a while, then Xiao Hua took his leave. After settling the matter of the seeds, Xiao Hua's mood was very good. The reverse light in his mind's space rotated every day, and the light was also shining all the time. Planting a few more spirit grasses and planting a few less spirit grasses didn't seem to have much of an effect. Moreover, there seemed to be a lot of empty space inside the space. Xiao Hua only needed about 10 feet of space to store things. Xiao Hua actually wanted to plant spirit grasses inside the space. That would be 2 years of growth in a day. Casually taking out a stalk of spirit grasses could be exchanged for spirit stones or spirit pills. Looking at the sky, and then looking at the places he had just explored, Xiao Hua knew that this Yiji was definitely not something he could explore in a day. Moreover, other than high-grade fireball talismans and 200-year-old spiritual herbs, he really didn't have anything else to exchange. If he took out 200-year-old spiritual herbs many times in a day, wouldn't it be easy for others to notice him? Xiao Hua's cultivation was too low. He didn't dare to take this risk. Having developed a vigilant heart, Xiao Hua no longer wandered around. Looking left and right, he found Yiji and took down the camouflage cloth in a secluded place. Looking at the exquisite camouflage cloth in his hand, Xiao Hua couldn't help but smile. This camouflage cloth was very comfortable on his body. Although it could only cover his face, Xiao Hua felt that exchanging a few high-grade fireball talismans for it was really worth it. Yen, this young cultivator is also a loose cultivator, but he seems to be quite different from Pai Lan, Duo Xiong, and the others. He relies on his own camouflage cloth to cultivate. He can be considered self-reliant. I just don't know where he cultivates. If I can make friends with him, it would be a good thing. Xiao Hua couldn't help but look at the stall before noon, but it was already empty. He didn't know if the camouflage cloth was sold out. Or did that young cultivator leave a step earlier? Oh, right, how is this camouflage cloth made? It can actually change one's face, it's really amazing. Xiao Hua thought again. However, when he looked at the camouflage cloth for a long time, he couldn't see anything. Only then did he put it in his storage bag and quickly return to the inn. Since he decided to go to Yiji more often, Xiao Hua didn't change inns. He threw a mid-grade spirit stone on the counter and booked a room for 5 days. Taking the yellow talisman from the innkeeper, Xiao Hua didn't let the waiter follow him and returned to the room by himself. Now Xiao Hua somewhat understood that inside the inn, spirit stones were used for transactions. It seemed that taking out 1 or 2 mid-grade spirit stones wouldn't attract attention, so he didn't hide anything. After returning to the room, Xiao Hua didn't rest. He knew that using a talisman brush to draw low-grade fireball talismans was a condition for him to enter Heaven Forsaken. He had to quickly draw the fireball talismans. He didn't want to be unable to enter Heaven Forsaken when he could clearly refine high-grade fireball talismans. Wouldn't that be a matter of eternal regret? Just like before, Xiao Hua prepared the talisman ink and talisman paper. Because he knew that he wasn't confident, Xiao Hua specially took out the talisman paper he exchanged from Yi Ji. Xiao Hua closed his eyes for a moment, still silently reciting the runes of the fireball talisman in his heart. Then he used his hand to grab the talisman brush, dipped it in talisman ink, and smoothly drew on the talisman paper. -5. Chapter 1322. I'm afraid this is the 20th talisman paper. Xiao Hua's expression was somewhat gloomy as he looked at the talisman paper. The thickness of the talisman paper was uneven, and the talisman characters were somewhat deformed. Xiao Hua was incomparably familiar with the talisman characters of the fireball talisman in his mind. He could draw it casually with his hand, but after using the talisman brush, it wasn't that he couldn't control his magic power, but the strength of the brush was different. No matter how he held the light talisman brush, it was simply like a colossal object that weighed tens of thousands of kilograms. He didn't know how to draw it again. Xiao Hua pondered. The talisman paper caught fire with a peng sound. Xiao Hua fiercely spat out a mouthful of saliva, threw the talisman brush on the ground, clapped his hand, and took out a high-grade talisman paper. Then, he dipped his hand in talisman ink and flicked his fingers. In a short moment, the talisman characters of the fireball talisman took shape. Immediately after, a strange spell was cast. After casting the last spell and seeing that the fireball talisman was completed, Xiao Hua let out a long breath. It could be considered that he spat out the gloominess of failing to refine the fireball talisman 20 times with the talisman brush. It's really strange. This talisman paper was refined quite smoothly with the fingers. Why do others have to use a talisman brush to refine it? Oh, it should be drawn. How can a talisman brush be used to refine it? Xiao Hua was extremely puzzled. No wonder Senior Ma said that this talisman crafting method is very difficult. It can only be successfully refined many times. I only wasted 20 talisman papers. It's not much. Xiao Hua looked at the talisman brush on the ground and was too lazy to refine it again. To tell the truth, if anyone could refine a high-grade yellow talisman, who would rack their brains and painstakingly struggle to draw a low-grade yellow talisman? There's nothing I can do, nothing I can do. Xiao Hua muttered and took out the small booklet with the incomplete confinement talisman. This was the happiest thing for him today. Of course, he had to leave it for last to enjoy. Xiao Hua took out the booklet. This booklet was much thicker than the small booklet for the fireball talisman. There were also many more talisman characters inside. The annotations, explanations, and so on were all complete. Unfortunately, at the end of the booklet, there were a few pages missing, and it seemed very incomplete. Of course, this kind of imperfection was only for others. Xiao Hua didn't think so. He first roughly looked at it. Although Xiao Hua had never seen the runes of this confinement talisman before, it looked really complicated. It was more than a level more troublesome than the fireball talisman's runes. However, it was one thing for Xiao Hua to look at it, but moving it with his fingers was another thing. Xiao Hua read the runes of the imprisonment talisman several times, then closed the booklet and memorized the runes in his heart. While memorizing the runes, his fingers couldn't help but move. Not only one hand, but the other hand also moved. An extremely nimble feeling came from his fingertips. The magic power in his body was also extremely free and easy as it flowed to his fingertips along with the hand seals. Xiao Hua almost had a feeling that if it wasn't for the lack of a certain opportunity, he could almost directly inscribe the runes in this technique onto the talisman paper. Hihi, could it be that this young master is really a talisman crafting genius? Xiao Hua was all smiles, and his little tail was already curled up. He dipped his finger into the ink, and his 5 fingers started to draw runes in the air. However, things were not as Xiao Hua had imagined. The runes of this confinement talisman were rather complicated. After using the ink, because he had to control his spiritual power and drive the ink to wrap spiritual power, it was not as easy as just waving his fingers. Before he could finish drawing all the runes, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth wrapped in the ink had already dissipated, and the ink scattered all over the ground. This. What's going on? Xiao Hua listened, and his eyes stared blankly at the dissipating spiritual power. He was somewhat depressed. Could it be that without the method of inscribing the runes, this confinement talisman really can't be refined? Thinking about it, the method of inscribing the confinement talisman was combined with the previous method of inscribing the runes. It was something that countless ancestors of the Dawn Rain continent had practiced and created. Xiao Hua erased the method of inscribing the confinement talisman as soon as he came up and wanted to successfully refine it. Opening up a new path, how? Could it be simple and easy? Xiao Hua thought for a moment, and tried a few more times. The result was the same. He couldn't finish inscribing the runes every time. Soon after, Xiao Hua tried using his other hand, and the result was the same. Alas, Xiao Hua shook his hand, and the ink was thrown away. He said self-deprecatingly, "It seems that this young master was too arrogant." As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and adjusted his breathing. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Hua suddenly jumped up from the ground, and energetically patted his storage pouch. He took out the talisman paper, ink, and booklet containing the confinement talisman. He was still muttering, "Damn it, why am I so stupid? Why can't I do this? Why didn't I think of it before?" Xiao Hua carefully looked at the runes of the confinement talisman a few more times. He was still muttering, but no words could be heard. The fingers of his 2 hands were still nimble. What was different from before was that the hand seals of Xiao Hua's 2 hands were different. Soon after, when Xiao Hua felt that he was already proficient, he waved his hands and dipped them in ink. His 10 fingers flicked together, and he actually used both hands to execute the same hand seal. The first round of the hand seal wasn't very smooth, and there were many places where Xiao Hua's mind couldn't keep up. But strangely, Xiao Hua's hands were extremely fluent in making up for these flawed places. There was no need for Xiao Hua's mind to cooperate. When Xiao Hua finished inscribing, the ink that wrapped the spiritual power didn't dissipate, but because the runes were drawn with both hands at the same time, it seemed slightly unbalanced. The corner of Xiao Hua's mouth curled up into a smile. He didn't use the final spell and allowed the rune to gradually disappear. Looking at the time when the runes began to disappear, it was actually a long time later. Oh, so it's like this. Once the runes of the confinement talisman are completely drawn, the spiritual power of heaven and earth can flow between the runes without leaking, and the runes can also be preserved for a long time. If the runes aren't completely drawn, the spiritual power of heaven and earth may flow into the air. The so-called method of writing runes must be a method to control the spiritual power of heaven and earth and not let it dissipate easily in the air. Immediately, Xiao Hua tried a dozen more times. Every time, he didn't use the final technique. He only drew the rune of the imprisonment talisman in the air. As the rune became more complete, the time the rune stayed in the air became longer and longer. Actually, if I can stop this rune, I don't need to draw it on the talisman paper. It can also turn into a yellow talisman. The idea was very easy, but it was extremely difficult to do. Xiao Hua didn't know what to use to replace the talisman paper and the ink. When the last confinement talisman stopped in the air, Xiao Hua's hand seals changed, and the runes gradually flashed, absorbing the spiritual power of heaven and earth in the surroundings. Along with the hand seal in Xiao Hua's hand, a kai sound was heard, and the runes entered a high-grade talisman paper. With a flash of brilliance, a confinement talisman was successfully refined by Xiao Hua without any mishap. Like I said, I am a genius at refining yellow talismans. Xiao Hua's eyes were so mesmerized that they became slits. He very lovingly picked up the extremely exquisite confinement talisman. The confinement talisman was earth yellow in color, and the talisman characters on it were densely packed like a fine spider web. These fine talisman characters seemed to be floating on top of the talisman paper. With a slight movement of his fingers, the earth-yellow brilliance faintly flowed like mercury. Just this appearance alone was several grades higher than the fireball talisman. It was truly worthy of being called a high-level yellow talisman. I don't know what grade this confinement talisman is. No matter what, it should be a middle-grade talisman. Xiao Hua thought in his heart, and he checked the spiritual power in his body. The check wasn't very tight, and his spiritual power increased a bit. Although it wasn't much, it was still a bit more than refining the fireball talisman. It seemed that refining confinement talismans was also a good way to cultivate. Thinking that the agreed time with Ling Zhongyu was 3 days later, Xiao Hua didn't want to go to Yiji anymore. He hid in the inn and alternately refined the fireball talisman and confinement talisman. At the same time, he also comprehended the Tao of Heaven and cultivated Shong Hua Ming's second level of Qi refining cultivation technique. 3 days passed extremely quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was time. Xiao Hua very reluctantly came out from the inn. If it wasn't for the inn's daily payment of 20 low-grade spirit stones, if it wasn't for Xiao Hua didn't have any cultivation techniques above the second level of Qi refining to cultivate, if it wasn't for the limited spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the inn, if it wasn't for Xiao Hua's 3 days of cultivation were only equivalent to a day for others, Xiao Hua really wanted to continue cultivating in such a leisurely manner. However, in these 3 days, Xiao Hua's harvest was also huge. In addition to the increase in his spiritual power and the advancement of his cultivation, the talisman ink and talisman paper exchanged from Yiji were all refined into fireball talismans and confinement talismans. The only thing that made Xiao Hua feel regretful was that the fireball talisman he refined with the talisman pen still didn't succeed. After leaving the inn, Xiao Hua pinched the message talisman in his storage bag and felt a little bewildered. It's already been a few days, but I still haven't seen Senior Ma's message. Should I send a message talisman to ask? But what if he wants me to test it? I also can't draw a fireball talisman. Ari, it's better not to send a message first. Wait until I get the spirit grass seeds and let the puppet sow them in the space first. I should draw a fireball talisman first. The cultivation technique, that's the most important thing, Xiao Hua thought and arrived outside Yiji. He found a remote place and put on the so-called camouflage cloak before entering Yiji. Today's Yiji was just as lively as a few days ago, but the people were different. As for how many cultivators there were compared to a few days ago, only the heavens knew. At the very least, Xiao Hua who was wearing the camouflage cloak was the same. Cough cough, there was also that young cultivator who was selling daoist robes the moment he entered Yiji. Everyone, come and take a look. This is a top-notch daoist robe. Aside from having no defense, it has all the functions of removing dust, removing odors, and so on. It's much cheaper than the daoist robes that fellow daoist usually uses. Fellow daoist, don't look at how your daoist robe is of the highest quality. However, fellow daoist should always wear something else. Who knows when it might be of use? Hearing this somewhat familiar voice, the corner of Xiao Hua's mouth slightly rose. -5. Chapter 1323. Seeing that there weren't many people in front of his stall, Xiao Hua cupped his hands and smiled. Fellow daoist Fu, seeing this, the young cultivator smiled and said, Fellow daoist, you really have good eyesight. Hey, fellow daoist's bewilderment looks quite familiar. I exchanged fireball talismans for this 3 days ago. Does fellow daoist Fu still remember? Haha, of course I do. The cultivator laughed. Fellow daoist Xiao's fireball talismans are really good. I have already exchanged them for many good things. This is all thanks to fellow daoist Xiao. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hands and said that he didn't dare. Right, fellow daoist Xiao, do you still have fireball talismans today? The cultivator became interested. Looking at his stall, he smiled and said, How about you give me some daoist robes? I'll give you a discount. Xiao Hua didn't want these. He waved his hands and said with a smile, I don't have any more fireball talismans on me. I just came here to look around. I don't plan to buy anything. So it's like this. Then. Fellow Daoist Xiao, you can look around first. The young cultivator's expression changed slightly. He was about to greet others when Xiao Hua immediately called out, "Right, fellow Daoist Fu, I heard fellow Daoist mention a few days ago that you're also a loose cultivator." "Hihi, I wasn't a loose cultivator before. It's just that I encountered some things later on and had no choice but to become a loose cultivator. Fortunately, I have some skills and can make some very basic magic tools. I can barely take care of my own cultivation." It seemed that he didn't want to say more. Magic tools. These are all magic tools. Xiao Hua looked at the Daoist robes in his hands and asked curiously. Seeing that there were no cultivators nearby, Zhao Yang turned his head and said, "These Daoist robes and the bewilderment on your body can all be considered magic tools. It's just that they're extremely crude." Chiqiao sect focuses on refining magic tools. Sect Master Daoist Liu Hong is a famous master refiner in my country of Xi. Fellow Daoist Fu's refining skills. Xiao Hua felt that something was wrong halfway through his words and immediately stopped. At the same time, another female cultivator in front of him was attracted by the exquisite Daoist robes. Zhao Yang eloquently introduced them. Xiao Hua took a look, shook his head slightly, and turned around to look for Ling Zhongyu. Ling Zhongyu's spiritual grass sect's stall was still there. Ling Zhongyu was still the same, reading the grass codex with relish. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Daoist Ling." Without waiting for Xiao Hua to finish, Ling Zhongyu didn't even raise his head and said, "These spiritual plants cost 1 low-grade spirit stone each. Fellow Daoist, you can put down the spirit stone and take the spiritual plant that you like." His tone and words were exactly the same as 3 days ago. Presumably, he had to say these words every day. "Hihi, fellow Daoist Ling, have you brought I's spirit grass seeds?" Xiao Hua asked in a slightly louder voice. "Oh, so it's fellow Daoist Xiao. You're finally here. I thought you wouldn't come." When Ling Zhongyu heard that, he hurriedly put down the book and removed the storage bag from his waist. He said, "If you don't come, I will be in trouble." Xiao Hua asked curiously, "Didn't fellow Daoist Ling say 3 days later? Isn't today the 4th day? Could it be that I remembered wrongly?" "Oh, right. You really remembered wrongly. When I said 3 days later, it was the 3rd day, which was yesterday. When I returned to the mountain yesterday, I was scolded by Master. He said that I didn't take your deposit. If you really didn't sell it, Master and I would have worked for nothing. I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Xiao Hua smiled and hurriedly took out the promised spirit stones. He said, "Since that's the case, fellow Daoist Ling, please accept the spirit stones first. I will look at the seed." "It's okay. This storage bag contains the seeds that fellow Daoist Xiao wants. I took out almost all the spiritual plant seeds in the spiritual grass sect. I picked 10 seeds of each spiritual plant." "Oh, right. There are also some shriveled seeds in the storage bag. There are also some seeds that I don't know the names of and can't be planted. I'll give them all to fellow Daoist Xiao." As Ling Zhongyu spoke, he took the spirit stones and put them into another storage bag. Then, he handed the storage bag in his hand to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua opened the storage bag and looked inside. There were indeed many seeds in the storage bag, far exceeding his expectations. He smiled and put the seeds into his storage bag. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, fellow Daoist Ling. It's okay, it's okay. If fellow Daoist Xiao comes across any rare spiritual plants in the future, you can bring them to I. The spiritual grass sect is also willing to buy such spiritual plant." Ling Zhongyu waved his hand and took the storage bag with a smile. "Haha, of course, of course." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and bid farewell. After leaving the spiritual grass sect stall, Xiao Hua found a place with fewer people and put the storage bag into the maze. With a stroke of his hand, all the spiritual plant seeds were put into the space. Xiao Hua was still quite anxious. 1 day in the space was equivalent to 2 years in the outside world. Moreover, while he was refining the yellow talismans and cultivating in the inn, Xiao Hua had already ordered the puppets in the space to cultivate the spiritual plants. Now that he had the seeds in hand, Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't waste any time. After putting the seeds into the space, he ordered the puppets to start planting. Xiao Hua paid attention to the things in the space as he casually walked forward. After walking for about the time it took to eat a meal, he came to a place where there weren't many people. Looking around, Xiao Hua was quite puzzled. This place wasn't small, but there were only a few stalls. The number of people who came here could be counted. It was far from the bustling scene he saw earlier. Xiao Hua looked around and saw that the items in the stalls were all black and yellow. There were all kinds of shapes and sizes. Moreover, he couldn't tell what they were used for. Looking at the few cultivators in front of the stalls, Xiao Hua could see that all of them had cultivations above the 10th level of foundation establishment. There were even two that Xiao Hua couldn't see through. If they weren't foundation establishment cultivators, then they were golden core cultivators. Xiao Hua didn't dare to go forward. After hesitating for a moment, he was about to retreat. At this time, he came face to face with a dark and thin man. That man looked a little anxious and walked in a hurry. Moreover, Xiao Hua couldn't see the man's cultivation. Seeing that the man was coming face to face, Xiao Hua was so frightened that he quickly retreated to the side and made way. That man walked past Xiao Hua without even looking at Xiao Hua and went straight to an empty stall. With a clap of his hand, dozens of similar black items were placed on the stall. Then, without waiting for the cultivator to sit down, a water blue brilliance flashed above the stall. A distorted figure appeared in the air. Xiao Hua could see clearly that it was a Jingbua City disciple around the 9th level of Qi refinement. "Senior, please pay the admission spirit stones." The disciple very politely cupped his hands and said to the cultivator. The cultivator said in a bad mood, "Didn't you see that I just came? I haven't exchanged anything yet. How can I pay you spirit stones?" "Hee, senior must be joking. As long as you place something in Yi Ji and want to exchange, my Jingbua City will charge 10 low-grade spirit stones for admission. These 10 low-grade spirit stones won't be in senior's eyes, right?" The Jingbua City disciple said. "Of course I won't be in senior's eyes, but I haven't started the exchange yet. How can I pay spirit stones? If I don't exchange anything after paying spirit stones, wouldn't I have paid 10 low-grade spirit stones for nothing?" The dark and thin cultivator's anxious expression slowly faded and he began to argue with the Jingbua City disciple. "Hee, I'll let senior know. My Jingbua City opened the Yi Market and Yi Bazaar for the convenience of fellow cultivators so that they can have a place to trade without worry. 10 low-grade spirit stones for the Yi Market and 1 mid-grade spirit stone for the Yi Market are both very cheap. Just based on the fact that my Jingbua City disciples can protect the entire Yi Market and Yi Market without any accidents, it is worth it. It's not senior's first time here, so why are you making things difficult for this junior?" "Hee, I was originally going to participate in the Yi Ji Bazaar in 10 days, but there are some urgent matters in the sect and I can't make it back in 10 days. Don't you think I's depressed? I would rather pay you 1 spirit stone. I wouldn't dare. Today is Yi Ji. Senior only needs to pay 10 low-grade spirit stones." The Jingbua City disciple was clearly well-trained and his words were watertight. "Okay, you can go now. Don't delay I's exchange." With that, the cultivator took out 10 spirit stones from his storage bag and threw them over. The Jingbua City disciple took the spirit stones and immediately disappeared in a flash. As soon as the figure of the Jingbua City disciple disappeared, the dark and thin cultivator waved his hand, and a dozen large words appeared in front of the stall. Xiao Hua then heard the cultivator shout, "Fellow Taoists, this poor Daoist has some rarely seen demonic tools. Originally, I was going to bring them to the market in 10 days, but today, I really had no choice but to take them out. If anyone has good eyesight, come and take a look. This poor Daoist's demonic tools cost 1 top-grade spirit stone each." "Ah! Demonic weapons! Top-grade spirit stones?" Hearing the dark and thin cultivator's words, Xiao Hua was very surprised and thought he had misheard. However, when he saw the large words in front of the cultivator, he knew that he hadn't misheard. When the cultivators at the side heard this, they all gathered around and each took what they wanted and carefully looked at it. The few Foundation establishment cultivators even released their divine senses and scanned it over and over again. Cough cough, fellow cultivators, this is a demonic weapon. Magic power can't be activated, and divine senses can't penetrate it. Why are you using your divine senses? Seeing everyone choose as if they were choosing magic weapons, the dark and thin cultivator couldn't help but frown. He knew that he had come in a hurry today and wouldn't meet any discerning cultivators. Sure enough, those people looked at the demonic artifacts in their hands and coldly glanced at the dark and thin cultivator. Then, they threw away the things in their hands and turned to leave. A few of them walked out of this area and a few of them went to other stalls. Xiao Hua didn't dare to go forward and only looked at the demonic weapons on the stall with interest. He often heard Zhong Qingxiao talk about the great war between immortals and demons, but he had never seen any demonic weapons. How could he not be curious when he saw one now? However, the demonic weapons on the cultivator's stall were all black and he couldn't see their quality. If the cultivator didn't say it, Xiao Hua would never know that these unremarkable things were demonic weapons. -5. Chapter 1324. That's right, this demonic tool, where did it come from? Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization and said to himself, demonic tools are used by the people of the devil realm. Divine sense and magic power can't be used. What do cultivators like us need them for? Oh, maybe this area is dedicated to selling demonic tools. No wonder there aren't many cultivators here. Xiao Hua already understood the reason for the lack of people, so he turned around to leave. This so-called demonic tool was a bit far away from him, so he didn't need to waste time here. However, the instant Xiao Hua turned around, a powerful divine sense swept over him and scanned him from top to bottom, from inside to outside. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed and almost stopped. However, he also knew that this was only divine sense and not coercion. A small second-layer qi refining cultivator like him shouldn't have been able to sense it. Therefore, he forcefully suppressed the throbbing in his heart and still turned around, preparing to leave. "Little doll, come over here." A voice sounded as if it was speaking in his ear. Xiao Hua was stunned. That voice belonged to the dark and thin cultivator from a moment ago. Why is he looking for me? Xiao Hua was baffled and could only stop. Soon after, he looked left and right in bewilderment. Then, he pointed at his nose and asked, Is this senior calling this junior? Yes, he's calling you. Apart from you, who else would call you a little doll? The dark and thin cultivator had an impatient expression. He stretched out his right hand and beckoned with his index finger. He called out, "Quickly come over, this old man has something to tell you." "Yes, this junior will go over right away," Xiao Hua replied. He didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest and hurriedly ran in front of that person's stall. He bowed and said, "Senior, I wonder why you called this junior over. First, take off this thing of yours." The dark and thin cultivator coldly said, "What's the use of wearing this thing? This old man can see your true appearance with a single glance. You're just a small second-layer qi refining little doll. What is there that you don't dare to reveal?" Xiao Hua was speechless. After thinking for a moment, he obediently took off the camouflage mask and revealed his true appearance. "Sigh, it's just an ordinary face. What are you afraid of? If you really want to cover your face, then go to the 7 Possibilities sect's shop and buy a real masking mask. That thing is useless." The dark cultivator nodded. "Senior, please understand. Junior is a rogue cultivator. I'm afraid that if I do something inappropriate and fall into the eyes of others, I'll attract trouble. That's why I thought of this Mi Yong. However, Junior really can't afford the Mi Yong of Chichiao sect." Xiao Hua honestly replied, "Nonsense. Of course I know you're a loose cultivator. You're already so old but you're still in the second layer of qi refining. If you're not a loose cultivator, then what are you? I'm in a great mood today and I like you, so I'll give you a chance. If you can help me with something, I'll tell you my name. In the future, you can use my name to do something. Of course, If your enemy catches you and wants to take your life, you can use my name and maybe they'll let you live. Oh, right, this time. What do you think? This. Hearing the dark cultivator's words, Xiao Hua knew this matter wouldn't be easy. After thinking for a moment, he cupped his hands and said, Senior, please tell me. I'll see if I can help. Whether I can help or not, I can't say. It depends on whether you're willing to help or not. The old man glanced at Xiao Hua. Senior, please speak your mind. Good, it's actually very simple. I have many demonic tools in my stall, you only need to buy one. Ah! Xiao Hua was stunned and stammered, Senior, you're not mistaken, right? Junior, just reached the second layer of chi refining and I'm a loose cultivator. Why would I want a demonic tool? A demonic tool isn't a magic tool. It doesn't require spiritual sense or magic power. It doesn't matter if you're in the second layer of chi refining or middle foundation establishment, you can use it. I only let you pick because I like you. The old man's expression changed. But, won't you consider other people? Xiao Hua turned his head and wanted to point at other people, but just as he raised his head, he was stunned. Just now, there were still several people strolling around this area, but now, there was no trace of them. Not even a single hair could be seen. There were only several cultivators with their eyes closed, sitting upright behind their respective stalls. It was unknown whether they were adjusting their breathing or recuperating. Xiao Hua was speechless. Who told him to be a second-layer chi refining cultivator? He couldn't outrun them even if he ran. But, Senior, it's not that I'm being rude. Even if I wanted to buy your demonic tool, I'm just a loose cultivator. How could I take out a supreme-grade spirit stone? To tell the truth, I haven't seen what a supreme-grade spirit stone looks like. Xiao Hua said self-mockingly. You want to see a supreme-grade spirit stone, but supreme-grade spirit stone doesn't want you. The dark and thin old man mocked, I know you don't have a supreme-grade spirit stone, but since you took out 700 or 800 high-grade spirit stones, I'll let you pick one at will. 700 or 800 high-grade spirit stones? Xiao Hua said in shock, isn't that 7 or 8 supreme-grade spirit stones? How is it cheap? You ignorant thing, the dark and thin cultivator cursed, 1,000 high-grade spirit stones is only one supreme-grade spirit stone. I'm really too lazy to talk to you. Quick, take out all the things in your storage bag. I'll let you pick a demonic tool. Ah! Hearing this, Xiao Hua's face turned green. His storage bag contained a lot of spiritual herbs, fireball talismans, forbidden talismans, and some talisman paper, talisman ink, and talisman brushes used to refine yellow talismans. He originally wanted to come to Yi Ji to exchange for some good things, but now he regretted it. Why did he put these things in his storage bag? The most important thing was that he did a little calculation. All these things added up were not worth a supreme-grade spirit stone. Even 700 or 800 high-grade spirit stones were not enough. If he took them all out, wouldn't they all be taken away by this dark and thin old man? And what was left for him was nothing more than a demonic tool that was neither good for eating nor drinking, and even more useless. Senior, this junior, indeed has no use for this demonic tool. Xiao Hua's body shrank back. Moreover, the spirit stones in this junior storage bag will be used for other purposes. Senior, you can't force me to buy or sell, right? Xiao Hua was almost about to cry. He spoke very pitifully. Unfortunately, that dark and thin cultivator was not a person who cherished flowers and cherished the fairer sex. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, his face turned cold, and he said with a smile, Hey, of course, how could this old man dare to force you to buy or sell in this Jinghua city? Even if Yi Ji's guards didn't say anything, that city lord Liu wouldn't let this old man off. This old man naturally wouldn't dare to make things difficult for you. Xiao Hua's face eased slightly, but thinking about the conversation between this dark and thin cultivator and the Jinghua city disciple just now, Xiao Hua's heart unconsciously thumped, and he secretly said, It seems, he's not that easy to talk to, right? Sure enough, that old man said unhurriedly, In any case, this old man remembers your face. Unless you live in Jinghua City for the rest of your life and don't take a step out of Jinghua City, otherwise. The old man didn't continue speaking. He merely lowered his head and fiddled with the pitch-black demonic tool on the stall, ignoring Xiao Hua. However, Xiao Hua's face turned pale. This was an undisguised threat, but what could Xiao Hua do? His bewilderment couldn't block the other's divine sense. His true appearance had been seen long ago. Even if he wanted to escape, there was no way to escape. But the problem is, of all the people you could pick, you just had to pick me. Xiao Hua was extremely indignant. After pondering for a while and seeing that no one else had come, Xiao Hua murmured, "That. Senior, can you leave this junior some spirit stones? Otherwise, this junior won't have a place to stay at night. This old man's name isn't limited to just supreme-grade spirit stones. You bought a demonic tool that's rarely seen in the Daybreak Continent's cultivation world and even paid with your life. What's there to be dissatisfied about? You still want this old man to make concessions? Not a chance," the old man said resolutely and decisively. Then, he looked at Xiao Hua's waist and hooked his index finger. "Still not going to hurry up and give it to this old man?" Xiao Hua used his teeth to bite his lip. He was truly hesitant and unwilling to part with it. However, looking at the old man's cold gaze, he still endured it. He reached out and was just about to take something out of his storage pouch when he heard the old man coldly say, "This old man wants you to give me the entire storage pouch. Don't worry, this old man will only take the things worth 1 supreme-grade spirit stone. I won't touch anything else." "Senior, you just said." Xiao Hua wanted to argue that it was 700 or 800 high-grade spirit stones, but just as he said it, he didn't know if it was the old man's gaze or if it was because he felt it was boring. He shut his mouth, took off his storage pouch from his waist, and handed it over. TSK, look at your broken storage pouch." This old man has never seen such a broken and cramped space. No wonder you were embarrassed to take it out. What kind of broken things are these? The dark and thin old man took Xiao Hua's storage pouch and opened it to take a look. He casually took out a few fireball talismans and imprisonment talismans. With a very disdainful expression, he threw them back in. "Yee! There are actually a few 200-year-old spirit herbs. This is beyond this old man's expectations." Then, the old man took out a few ordinary spirit herbs and casually looked at them. He smiled and said, "All right, little doll, you take a pile of broken yellow talismans and these spirit herbs. There are also a few hundred mid-grade spirit stones to exchange for a demonic tool with this old man." "Ari, this old man pitied you and reluctantly agreed. You can choose one." As he spoke, he took all the things in Xiao Hua's storage pouch and put them into his own storage pouch. Then, he returned the empty storage pouch to Xiao Hua. Looking at the storage pouch that didn't even have a low-grade talisman pen, Xiao Hua wanted to cry but had no tears. However, he had already taken out everything. He couldn't just let it go to waste. Xiao Hua could only look at the old man's stall with an ashen face. On the stall, the dozen or so demonic tools were very strange and their shapes were also strange. Xiao Hua simply didn't know which one was which. After looking for a moment, the old man became impatient and urged, "Little doll, quickly choose one. This old man still has things to do." "Yes." Xiao Hua looked at it again, and his gaze fell on a broken spear tip. -5. Chapter 1325. This magic tool was pitch black and very similar to the usual spear tip. However, there was a clear crack at the back of the spear tip, as if it was split from the head of a spear. The reason why Xiao Hua's gaze fell on this spear tip was purely because he couldn't see the shape of other magic tools, but this spear tip looked somewhat familiar. When the dark skinny old man saw Xiao Hua's gaze fall on the spear tip, he immediately stretched out his hand and grabbed the spear tip. His hand paused for a moment and a strange expression appeared on his face. Then he raised his arm and handed the spear tip to Xiao Hua and said, "Little kid, did you think of this?" Xiao Hua lowered his head and looked at the spear tip in front of him. It was only shining with a dark light and there was nothing special about it. If the old man didn't say that it was a magic tool, he wouldn't have been able to see it. Xiao Hua swept a glance at the spear tip. He was somewhat unwilling and wanted to look at other places. "Enough, Little guy, take this thing. You want to trade this old man's magic tool with your little things. I don't know if you have accumulated good karma in your previous life, but you shouldn't be discontent. The old man coldly threw the spear point towards Xiaohua's hand. Then, with a wave of his hand, all the magic tools in the booth were collected by him. His movements were very fast, and after a flash, all the items were collected by him. Xiaohua was in a hurry to catch the spear point, so he didn't pay attention to where the old man collected the magic tools. Xiaohua's hand just touched the spear tip when a cold feeling passed from the spear tip to his hand and then up his arm. Almost at the same time, his heart also felt cold. Ayo, what's going on? Xiaohua was greatly alarmed in his heart. However, just as this astonished thought arose in his mind, the weight of the spear tip suddenly dropped down, causing Xiaohua's hand to loosen. The heavy spear tip actually caused Xiaohua to be caught off guard, causing him to drop it to the ground. Ha ha ha! The dark skinny old man saw this and laughed loudly. His figure flashed across the sky and flew away at a low altitude. Then, a low voice sounded in Xiaohua's ear. Little kid, this old man is Mingsue Mountain's Shiwuming. You can borrow this name once. This old man acknowledges it. Shiwuming of Mingsue Mountain? Xiaohua was stunned. He had never heard of this name before. When he raised his head to look again, Shiwuming was nowhere to be seen. There were still a few stall owners at the side. They lowered their heads and cultivated with their eyes closed. No one paid any attention to him. Sigh. I'm so unlucky. Xiaohua sighed and squatted down. He reached out his hand to pick up the spear tip that had fallen to the ground. After all, he had exchanged everything for this spear tip. Even if it was trash, he still had to keep it. Hey! The spear tip is so heavy. Xiaohua squatted down and saw clearly that the ground of Yiji was originally paved with huge bluestone. When the spear tip fell to the ground, it actually smashed the entire bluestone. Of course, the ground of Yiji had a restriction array. The bluestone on the ground was not really smashed, but the restriction array on the bluestone was broken. When Xiaohua squatted down, the cracked restriction array had already begun to gradually recover. Are you kidding me? Xiaohua stared dumbfoundedly at the broken restriction array on the ground. How familiar was this situation to him? Wasn't this the result of him using force to break the restriction array? All of a sudden, Xiaohua's eyes brimmed with fervor. He had a new idea. The sorrow of having been robbed clean of everything had long since been tossed to the highest heavens. His heart was once again filled with joy, disbelief, and shock. Xiaohua did not immediately pick up the spear tip. Instead, he first maintained his squatting position and looked around. The surrounding situation was the same as before. No one was interested in this unlucky guy. Then, Xiaohua reached out and grabbed the back half of the spear tip. With a slight force, the spear tip was held in Xiaohua's hand. No one could see the weight of the spear tip at this time. Then, Xiaohua clapped his hand without hesitation and threw the spear tip into the storage bag. But just as the spear tip entered, Xiaohua suddenly felt the storage bag sink. It was very different from when he put things in before. He immediately opened it again and saw that the tip of the spear tip had sunk into the storage bag. He could not see it clearly. This. Xiaohua frowned. Needless to say, he already understood that it was not that the spear tip could not be put into the storage bag. It was just that his storage bag was really old. He was afraid that the space inside the storage bag was unstable. The spear tip was really too heavy. If it was placed there for too long, the entire storage bag would be destroyed. Thinking that this was a storage bag that he had exchanged spirit stones for, Xiaohua immediately felt distressed. He hurriedly raised the storage bag, and with a very hidden movement, he put the spear tip into the space in his mind. Fortunately, there was no change in the space. Damn it, in the future, I can't put anything valuable in the storage bag. I'll just treat it as a cover. Thinking about how he had been robbed by Shiwuming for no reason, Xiaohua's heart was bleeding. It was really an unexpected disaster. If he could have put less things in the storage bag, he would have suffered less losses. This old monster, she is really too much. Why did he force a deal without any reason? Why did he have to force someone to sell him a magic tool? Xiao Hua could not help but wonder. Moreover, he only let me know his name. Humph, only a fool would believe that by saying his name, he would be able to escape with his life. Or use his name to do something that doesn't require him to take responsibility. If he was really sincere, he should have at least given me a token or something. Sigh, Xiao Hua did not think about it. No matter what method Shi Wuming used to give him the promise, at least he bought a magic tool that was worth a piece of top-grade spirit stone. Xiao Hua only spent less than a piece of top-grade spirit stone to get the magic tool. He even spared his promise. What a good deal. It was too late to be secretly happy. At this time, the restriction below Xiao Hua's feet was still slowly recovering. Xiao Hua also lost interest in staying here any longer and hurriedly left this place, afraid that he would be stopped by some eccentric senior again. Fortunately, after he put on the concealment mask and left this area, no one stopped him. Although Xiao Hua had lost interest in going inside the Yi Ji, his talisman brushes and ink had all been taken away by Shi Wuming. He could only look for another stall to replenish his talisman crafting materials. After searching for a while, he found that this stall seemed to sell yellow talismans. There were not many talisman crafting materials. Just as he was about to turn around and look for his original spot, Xiao Hua's gaze fell on a rather large stall. This stall was surrounded by many cultivators. From time to time, some cultivators would take out spirit stones or other items to exchange with the stall owner. The stall owner was not alone, but a man and a woman. The two of them looked very similar and should be brother and sister. On this stall, there were yellow talismans and medicinal pills. These were all things that Xiao Hua urgently needed. Walking to the front of the stall, Xiao Hua observed. There were not many types of medicinal pills. There were Jiyu pill, Mojie pill, smoke feather pill, and so on. They were medicinal pills that could increase magic power, but their effects were slightly inferior to the Peiyuan pill. As for those yellow talismans, they were all Dan guiding talismans, Dan controlling talismans, Dan condensing talismans, Dan collecting talismans, Dan guiding talismans, Dan igniting talismans, 3 young talismans, and so on. There were even saltpeter, fire gourd, and other items placed on the side, which were essential for refining medicinal pills. Xiao Hua stood still for a moment. He looked at the items that the other cultivators were exchanging and the spirit stones they were taking out. He had a rough idea in his heart. At this time, there was a gap. The female cultivator smiled like a flower and said to Xiao Hua, "Fellow Daoist, the medicinal pills that my Imperial Pill School concocts are well known. May I know what kind of pills fellow Daoist wants?" Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Daoist, the prices of these medicinal pills are rather expensive. I also know a little about the art of pill concoction. I only want to buy some necessary yellow talismans, saltpeter, and other items from your school. Fellow Daoist's words are different. The medicinal pills of my humble school are all genuine goods. Moreover, they were all concocted by the elders of my school. Of course, they need the corresponding spirit stones. If fellow Daoist concocts them yourself, it will take a lot of effort and the quality of the medicinal pills won't be good. It would be better to just buy the medicinal pills directly." The female cultivator was not angry and only said softly, "Hee, it's better to teach a man how to fish than to teach him how to fish. Fortunately, it's good to be self-reliant." Xiao Hua said, "It's fine. I will prepare a set of yellow talismans and saltpeter for fellow Daoist. I just don't know if fellow Daoist will use spirit stones or items to exchange for them." As the female cultivator said this, she walked to the side and began to pick up the yellow talismans used for pill concoction. "I don't have any spirit stones on me, only some spiritual herbs. Fellow Daoist, please appraise them," Xiao Hua said confidently. "Hee, it's best to have spiritual herbs. They're more useful than any spirit stones. What my Imperial Pill School needs to concoct medicinal pills are old spiritual herbs." The female cultivator was not surprised. She smiled and prepared the yellow talismans and saltpeter. "But, fellow Daoist, these spiritual herbs." The female cultivator straightened her body and asked, "Here, fellow Daoist, Please take a look. Just now, there were already cultivators who took out spiritual herbs that were more than 100 years old. Xiao Hua's courage grew a bit and he took out a few spiritual herbs that were more than 200 years old. Alas, Xiao Hua had no other choice. He actually wanted to take out some of the younger ones, but the ones in the space behind his head were all planted early on in Yellow Flower Ridge. All of them were around 200 years old. He couldn't reduce them even if he wanted to. Seeing the spiritual herbs in Xiao Hua's hand, the female cultivator's eyes lit up. She didn't look very surprised and only praised, "Fellow Deist, you're indeed skilled in concocting medicinal pills. These spiritual herbs are also old enough. They're the best quality spiritual herbs that my humble sect has seen today." As she said that, she handed over the yellow talismans, saltpeter, and other items in her hand. When Xiao Hua took them, he also handed the spiritual herbs to the female cultivator. The female cultivator counted them and said with a smile, "Fellow Deist, these spiritual herbs are indeed a bit too much. How about this, I give fellow Deist some more yellow talismans and saltpeter." "There's no need. Fellow Deist, if it's cheap, how about I take one of your precious school's medicinal pills?" Xiao Hua said with a smile. The female cultivator shook her head. "That won't do. Fellow Deist, you don't have enough spiritual herbs." "Hihi, since that's the case, I can only give my last spiritual herb to fellow Deist." As Xiao Hua said that, he took out another spiritual herb and handed it over. -5. Chapter 1326. With this spiritual herb, although it's still not enough, it's not far from it. The female cultivator was very straightforward. She took the spiritual herb, and without saying anything else, she took out a variety of medicinal pills, put them into a jade bottle, and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He reached out to take it, and after thanking her, he hesitated for a moment, then asked tentatively, "Fellow Deist, I want to ask, does your sect have pill recipes to exchange?" "Pill recipes?" The female cultivator was stunned, and her face immediately froze. She said coldly, "Fellow Deist, are you joking with me? Pill recipes are the same as cultivation techniques. Every sect treasures them, so who would exchange them for no reason? Since fellow Deist is also exchanging for pill refinement, could it be that fellow Deist also wants to exchange pill recipes? Hihi, if fellow Deist has such intentions, please take them out. My Imperial Pill School will accept them all. Moreover, we'll accept them at all cost." Xiao Hua blushed. Fortunately, he was wearing a camouflage cloak, so he wasn't afraid of being seen by others. He turned around and left the stall. The female cultivator didn't pay attention to him. She only thought that Xiao Hua was teasing her, so she turned around and greeted the others. "Sigh, not only are cultivation techniques hard to find, pill recipes are also hard to find. Although Sect Master has refined the Peiyuan pill before, I only watched from the side and didn't know the details. Even if I had spiritual herbs, I wouldn't have been able to refine it." Xiao Hua was somewhat depressed. Being a loose cultivator is indeed very difficult. Fortunately, I've already found a way to cultivate quickly. Coupled with the fact that I can refine yellow talismans, although I'm much slower than ordinary people, at least other people can run while I walk. It's much better than crawling like a snail. Xiao Hua comforted himself as he thought. His eyes also looked around. He didn't give up on his evil intentions, hoping for some kind of miracle. Unfortunately, even when the stall was about to end, he still didn't see any words related to pill recipes. Forget it, I'd better exchange for some talisman crafting materials. When I return to the inn later, I still have to craft talismans and cultivate. Xiao Hua extinguished his thoughts. He casually stopped at a stall and picked out talisman brushes, talisman ink, and talisman paper. Xiao Hua was a bit conflicted. What do you think? They don't want spiritual herbs, they only want spirit stones. Fellow Deist, you can take I's spiritual grasses and exchange them with other stalls. Why do you want spirit stones? Xiao Hua was very puzzled. Fellow Deist, I'll be returning to the mountain tomorrow to pack up a few things and wait for the trade fair in 10 days. My sect isn't good at concocting pills, so I want fellow Daoist spiritual plants to trade for items. Rather than using spiritual plants to trade for items, it would be better to directly use spirit stones. Could it be that fellow Daoist didn't see this? With that, he pointed. When Xiao Hua looked, he saw that it was written very clearly, spirit stones only. All right. Xiao Hua looked at the sky and remembered that there was still a mid-grade spirit stone on the body of the puppet in his space. He had no choice but to conceal it and take out the spirit stone from his space. Looking at the spirit stones Xiao Hua handed over, that cultivator shook his head and said, "Fellow Daoist, these spirit stones, have you used them before?" "Yes." Xiao Hua didn't deny it and calmly asked, "Fellow Daoist, won't you accept these spirit stones?" It's not that I won't accept them, but fellow Daoist should also know that the spiritual energy of the world inside a used spirit stone has already been reduced. It can't be used as a complete spirit stone for exchange. Xiao Hua naturally didn't know about this, but he also didn't say anything. He only smiled and said, "Then fellow Daoist can just follow the rules." Although fellow Daoist has used these spirit stones before, the quality is still good. They should be able to be exchanged for 80 low-grade spirit stones. If fellow Daoist feels that it's appropriate, I can deduct the spirit stones used to craft these talismans and exchange the remaining spirit stones for fellow Daoist. After waiting for Xiao Hua to nod, that cultivator took out 10 low-grade spirit stones. Xiao Hua sweated profusely. Fortunately, he only chose a broken talisman brush. Most of the materials were talisman paper and talisman ink. This incomplete mid-grade spirit stone could still be used. Xiao Hua received the spirit stones and hurriedly returned to the inn. At this moment, he didn't have any spirit stones in his storage pouch, and the inn didn't allow people to owe money. Tomorrow, Xiao Hua had to bring back some mid-grade spirit stones to continue the account. Although there were spiritual plants in the space, wouldn't it take a lot of time to obtain them? If he exchanged them, then there would be one less. It was far cheaper to refine yellow talismans, a method that could be used to cultivate and exchange for spirit stones. After entering the inn's room, Xiao Hua opened the restriction. After adjusting his breathing for a moment, he began to refine yellow talismans. First, he made several fireball talismans, then several confinement talismans. When Xiao Hua once again dipped his 10 fingers in talisman ink and prepared to refine the fireball talismans, his heart suddenly stirred. He inwardly said, "The talismans used to refine the fireball talismans are simple. The amount of magic power used is also small, but the amount of spiritual chi of heaven and earth wrapped in it is also small." When refining the confinement talismans, the talismans are complex, and the amount of magic power and spiritual chi of heaven and earth used is also extremely large. But why did I use the same amount of talisman ink? Could it be that when refining yellow talismans, the amount of talisman ink used can also be reduced? Other talisman masters probably wouldn't think of this kind of idea. They only thought of how to perfectly refine yellow talismans, how to use more talisman ink to draw more spiritual chi of heaven and earth into the yellow talismans. They didn't care about using more talisman ink. But our Xiao Hua, he was born stingy. Moreover, he was embarrassingly short of money today, so he had no choice but to instinctively consider this kind of matter. Xiao Hua was most willing to do things that were frugal. He very carefully controlled his magic power, and used the least amount of talisman ink possible to wrap the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Sure enough, it was just as Xiao Hua thought. The amount of talisman ink could really be reduced. Xiao Hua tried a dozen times, until the amount of talisman ink he could use was just barely enough to wrap the spiritual chi of heaven and earth onto the talisman paper. Only then did he stop. When he turned back and carefully calculated, he shockingly discovered that the talisman ink that could only refine 10 fireball talismans in the past, he could actually refine 13 of them now. The amount of talisman ink he could use had increased by 30%. Moreover, when Xiao Hua regulated his breathing, he discovered that his magic power had increased by a lot compared to before, and his control of magic power had become more precise. Although the increase in magic power wasn't much, To Xiao Hua, any increase meant that he could catch up with the cultivation speed of others a little bit. How could he not be happy? In the midst of his joy, Xiao Hua suddenly thought, Yi market will be in 10 days. At that time, there will be even more people coming, and there will also be a lot of things that can be used. It seems that I have to refine more yellow talismans. Perhaps I can exchange them for a lot of spiritual stones. That's right, at that time, the spiritual grass can also be exchanged for a good price. Ayo, that won't do. On the day of Yi market, there will definitely be people from the 100 Herbs Gate. If I take out the spiritual grass, it might attract the attention of the 100 Herbs Gate disciples. Although I have the mystic grass, it can't change its shape or hide its cultivation, so I will still be easily recognized by the 100 Herbs Gate. This spiritual grass, I absolutely can't reveal it. Xiao Hua unconsciously came to a realization, perhaps, this Yi market is already not bad, so it's better not to go to Yi market. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, but couldn't make up his mind, so he simply stopped thinking about it. He only focused on refining confinement talismans, using all his intelligence and wisdom on the great frugal research of how to use the least amount of talisman ink to attach the most amount of spiritual chi of heaven and earth. It was said that there was no time in cultivation, and refining yellow talismans and earning spiritual stones also had no time. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Hua was immersed in refining yellow talismans, taking them to Yi market to exchange for spiritual stones, talisman papers, and other things, cultivating. He almost forgot that he still had to join Tian Qi. The confinement talismans refined by Xiao Hua weren't as good as the fireball talismans he refined. They could only be considered as middle-grade talismans, and there was still a certain gap between them and high-grade talismans. But even so, it still allowed him to earn several hundred middle-grade spiritual stones. After all, that was a high-grade confinement talisman, and middle-grade confinement talismans were also very popular in Yi market. Even Xiao Hua almost thought of setting up a stall in Yi market himself. It's just that Xiao Hua didn't see He Zhongyu and Ling Zhongyu for the past few days, and there was no suitable person to ask at Yi Bazaar either. Only then did he put down his thoughts, and these two people probably left Jinghua City to prepare for Yi City. Ayo, I've stayed in Jinghua City for so many days, why is there still no news from Tian Qi? Xiao Hua walked in front of Yi market on this day, and suddenly thought, the middle-grade spiritual stone that Senior Qing gave me, I'm afraid it's already been used up. Could it be, there's no chance of joining Tian Qi? Thinking about it, it was also very possible. The cultivation method is gone, the pill formula is probably also gone. Xiao Hua was a little disappointed, and he couldn't help but have an impulse to send out the summoning talisman, but before his hand touched his ear, he stopped. Relying on others alone, this cultivation will always be dependent. Other individual cultivators can survive and improve their cultivation, why can't I? Ian, it's that 1,000-feet-old man, right? I heard from the sect master that he could cultivate to the gold core realm, so why can't I? Now I still have a cultivation method for the second layer of the aura refining realm to use, and I still have a lot of time to find a cultivation method. I don't believe I can't walk a path to heaven on my own. Xiao Hua's harvest these days filled him with confidence in cultivation, and it was also true. Xiao Hua refined yellow talismans every day, comprehended the heavenly Tao, and comprehended cultivation methods. His cultivation increased a little every day, and it was indeed much stronger than when he was in Shonghuaming. Moreover, from the looks of it, as long as he had a source of spiritual stones, there was nothing wrong with living in this inn for a year or so. However, the path of cultivation was very long, so how could he just stay in an inn? Forget it, I'd better earn some spiritual stones first. After all, Tian Qi didn't give me a final word. Maybe they still haven't gathered enough talisman masters. Xiao Hua shook his head then strode towards Yi Ji. As soon as he entered, a fourth-layer aura refining cultivator turned around from an extremely distant corner. He stared at Xiao Hua's back for a long time before quickly chasing after him. Xiao Hua had been a little careless these days. Moreover, that cultivator was really far away. Even if Xiao Hua stopped to watch, he might not be able to see anything. When Xiao Hua entered Yi Ji, He was very familiar with the way. He didn't stop at the nearby stalls and directly walked into Yi. Although Xiao Hua was a little relaxed outside Yi, he was still cautious inside. He tried his best not to go to any stalls that he had already been to. There were many similar stalls in Yi, so he didn't have to worry about finding a suitable stall. -5. Chapter 1327. Xiao Hua first found a stall and bought a lot of talisman ink and talisman paper, then he didn't stop at all and went to other places. Xiao Hua bought mid-grade talisman paper and low-grade talisman ink. Although the quantity wasn't small, he could absolutely not attract the attention of others. Through Xiao Hua's experiments these past few days, he found that no matter if it was high-grade talisman ink or mid-grade talisman ink, the fireball talismans he refined were all high-grade. It had nothing to do with talisman ink or talisman paper. However, if he used low-grade talisman paper, he could only refine low-grade confinement talismans. If he used mid-grade or high-grade talisman paper, he could refine mid-grade confinement talismans. Therefore, Xiao Hua naturally tried to be as frugal as possible and used the least amount of spirit stones to refine the most yellow talismans. After walking for a while, Xiao Hua suddenly felt a little strange and his footsteps slightly stagnated. When he turned a corner, he slightly turned his head to take a look. There were many cultivators behind Xiao Hua. Some were foundation establishment cultivators, some were aura refining cultivators, some were covering their faces, and some were swaggering. However, these people were all looking at the stall and no one paid any attention to him, a little cultivator who looked like he was only at the second layer of the aura refining realm. Even if he covered his face, no one would be suspicious. Strange, could it be that I didn't rest well these past few days? Xiao Hua frowned and muttered inwardly. Then, with a flash, he went in another direction. After a while, Xiao Hua's figure appeared in front of a small yellow talisman stall. Most of the stall was already empty, and there were only a few fireball talismans, ice talismans, and so on. A dark and thin old man was sitting there with his hands hanging down, seemingly bored to death. At this moment, Xiao Hua was very familiar with this place. He stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Fellow Daoist, please." "Hihi, fellow Daoist, what can I do for you?" The dark and thin old man seemed to understand Xiao Hua's meaning and returned the greeting with a smile. "Fellow Daoist, please take a look at this confinement talisman. What do you think?" As he spoke, Xiao Hua handed over a confinement talisman. The dark skinny old man nodded as he received it. After carefully looking at it, he nodded slightly and said, "Not bad. It's already very rare and commendable for such a high-level confinement talisman to be refined to such an extent. In my opinion, it should be above the middle grade. Alright, I wonder if fellow Daoist wants to buy it." Xiao Hua was secretly delighted. The old man looked at his empty stall and smiled. "Of course. Since fellow Daoist came to find this poor Daoist, it means that you have good intentions. How could this poor Daoist let fellow Daoist down? Please make a bid, fellow Daoist." Xiao Hua didn't beat around the bush. He felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. Well, a middle-grade, high-grade yellow talisman usually costs 120 low-grade spirit stones. I'm sure you know that. If you're willing, I'll pay 100 low-grade spirit stones. What do you think?" The old man said sincerely. "Fellow Daoist." Xiao Hua's expression was unreadable, but his tone was full of regret. He said, "I walked all the way here and already saw the market clearly. If it wasn't for the fact that I didn't want to go any further, why would I stop in front of fellow Daoist's stall? Fellow Daoist, you must be fated to give me such a low price. This really hurts. How much do you think is appropriate?" The old man's expression didn't change. "Normally, I'll pay 140 low-grade spirit stones. Who told I to be fated with you? How about 130? Xiao Hua said without any trace of politeness. "Hihi, fellow Daoist, I can't take advantage of fellow Daoist's price. I can't agree. If fellow Daoist really wants to make a move, then 110 low-grade spirit stones." The old man looked at Xiao Hua and said in a low voice, I know the origin of fellow Daoist spirit stones. If fellow Daoist agrees, I will give fellow Daoist some benefit. Xiao Hua pretended to ponder and said awkwardly, fellow Daoist, you're making things difficult for I. My bottom line is 120 low-grade spirit stones. If it's less, I won't be able to report back. Then forget it. The old man waved his hand and said, your bottom line is too high. I can't deal with it. Fellow Daoist, please go to the side and take a look. Oh, okay. Xiao Hua nodded and said with a smile, then fellow I's 200 or so middle-grade yellow talismans will benefit others. What? 200 or so talismans? The old man became anxious when he heard this and said, Ayo, fellow Daoist, you said we were fated. Why didn't you say so earlier? I want all of these yellow talismans. Don't. Fellow I's yellow talismans are 125 low-grade spirit stones each. Fellow Daoist, don't miss here. Xiao Hua's voice was a bit hoarse. 125? The old man was stunned when he heard this, but then he said with a smile, there's nothing to say. Fellow Daoist, we're fated. I accept this price. The old man was very clear that most of the talismans in Yi Ji were 5 elements yellow talismans. High-grade confinement talismans like this were still too few. If there were confinement talismans in his stall, not to mention that each one could be sold for 150 low-grade spirit stones, there would be many people buying confinement talismans along with 5 elements yellow talismans. Then fellow Daoist, please prepare the spirit stones. Xiao Hua said with a smile, I have 230 confinement talismans. Okay, it should be 287 middle-grade spirit stones and 50 low-grade spirit stones. I'll sell it to you for 290 middle-grade spirit stones. I don't know if fellow Daoist wants middle-grade spirit stones or high-grade spirit stones. The old man said very quickly, Yen, I'll take middle-grade spirit stones. I won't be able to share high-grade spirit stones with senior brothers when I go back. Xiao Hua nodded. Okay. The old man said while dividing the spirit stones in the storage bag. He said with a smile, fellow Daoist, you have so many yellow talismans. Actually, you can also occupy a stall yourself. Xiao Hua's heart moved, but he immediately waved his hand and said, I'm just running errands. I don't care about anything else. Occupying a stall is a bit troublesome. It's easy to attract attention. Ha ha ha, fellow Daoist, you're thinking too much. The old man reached out and took the storage bag Xiao Hua handed over. He put all the spirit stones inside, then took the confinement talismans Xiao Hua handed over. He said with a smile, you only need to pay Jingbua City a low-grade spirit stone every day. Anyone can set up a stall here. Fellow Daoist, you're wearing camouflage clothing. Who would know who you are? That's true. Xiao Hua said with a smile, but he immediately took the storage bag and waved his hand, saying, I still have to cultivate more. I don't have the time to deal with this. Hihi, since fellow Daoist doesn't want to do it, if these yellow talismans are cheap in the future, come and give them to I. The old man cupped his hands and said. Xiao Hua didn't immediately answer. He lowered his head and pondered. He looked back several times and didn't see any eyesores. Then, he raised his head and said with a smile, if fellow Daoist has some pill recipes here that you can provide to I can naturally consider it. Alas, fellow Daoist, you're asking for too much. The old man smiled bitterly. My Yang Xing sect only uses yellow talismans to maintain. We don't have pill recipes. Fellow Daoist, you're really making things difficult for I. Xiao Hua didn't say anything. He cupped his hands and was about to leave. The old man said again, however, there are many cultivators on the day of the exchange. Fellow Daoist, you can come and take a look with your sect's senior brothers. Maybe you can come across some ordinary pill recipes. Ien, thank you, fellow Daoist. Xiao Hua nodded and left. After waiting for a while, Xiao Hua nimbly hid in a remote place. He stuck out half of his head and stared at the yellow talisman stall just now. He saw that there weren't many people in front of the stall just now. After the old man wrote a few words, the number of people patronizing the stall also increased. However, after the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, those people gradually dispersed. Among them, there wasn't anyone that could attract Xiao Hua's attention. It's really strange. Could it be that I'm a bird frightened by the twang of a bow? Xiao Hua was depressed. Just as he was about to turn around, he heard a rather familiar voice in front of him shouting, This is just an ordinary jade pendant. How dare you ask for a piece of top-grade spirit stone?" Xiao Hua was greatly surprised. He looked as far as he could and saw a group of people surrounding a stall. The voice was coming from there. Xiao Hua, who quickly walked over to take a look, didn't expect that right after he left the stall, a cultivator dressed in camouflage clothes would walk over and point at the words written by the dark-skinned cultivator. He said in a hoarse voice, "Fellow Daoist, you actually have a confinement talisman here. You didn't seem to have one just now, right?" The dark and thin old man said with a smile, "I didn't have one just now, but that doesn't mean I don't have one now. I don't know if fellow Daoist needs it. This is comparable to a high-grade confinement talisman. I only sell it for 160 low-grade spirit stones. The price can be considered okay, but I want more. Do you have enough confinement talismans in your house?" The dark and thin old man didn't doubt him and said with a smile, "I have a lot of them waiting for the day of the exchange. If fellow Daoist really wants them, I'll give you 10 low-grade spirit stones for each yellow talisman. I have more than 200 talismans here." "Ah!" The cultivator was clearly somewhat shocked and almost couldn't believe it. "What? Do you think I's price is too high?" The dark and thin old man sneered, "It will be the exchange market in a few days. I'm afraid the price of this confinement talisman will rise to 2 mid-grade spirit stones. If fellow Daoist doesn't make a move now, it will be over when the time comes." And at this time, there were also several cultivators who were attracted by the black-armed old man's handwriting and walked over. Let's think about it again." That cultivator was somewhat hesitant, but the dark and thin old man didn't care and turned to greet the others. That cultivator stood for a moment and followed the few cultivators who left. Although Xiao Hua was watching from afar, how could he know the conversation? Even if he heard it, what could he know? How could he possibly know that under that bewilderment, there was a face filled with greed whispering, 150 low-grade spirit stones for a confinement talisman and 2 white-yellow talismans? Then, how many spirit stones would that be? This guy has been continuously appearing in the exchange market for many days, I'm afraid. Could it be that there are already a few top-grade spirit stones in that storage pouch? That cultivator was also cautious. After leaving the stall, he didn't turn back and didn't look in the direction where Xiao Hua left. After walking for a long time, he turned back and looked around. Xiao Hua heard a familiar voice and walked towards the crowd. When he got closer, he saw a person standing in front of a stall with a mess of things. He couldn't help but feel strange. -5. Chapter 1328. Standing in front of the stall was a boy about 10 years old. It was the Xuanyan school's disciple that Xiao Hua saw outside Jingpa City and was mocked the first time he came to Yiji. The current boy was far from the arrogant Xiao Hua saw. His face was flushed with anger, and there was a trace of stubbornness and sorrow in his eyes. Looking at his hand, he was holding an extremely ordinary-looking jade pendant. "Fellow Daoist, although your cultivation is higher than I's, you can't force a trade. I already told fellow Daoist that this is a jade talisman, not an ordinary jade pendant. If fellow Daoist wants to trade, you can take out a top-grade spirit stone or something of equivalent value. As long as I is satisfied, I will definitely fulfill fellow Daoist's requests." The stall owner was a tall man with a pink and white face. He was about 27 or 28 years old, but his cultivation was only at the 3rd level of Qi refinement. You rogue cultivator are unreasonable. Although I haven't seen a jade talisman, I know about the so-called yellow talismans, spirit talismans, and jade talismans. Your jade pendant doesn't have the slightest bit of spiritual energy, how can it be a jade talisman? The boy said hurriedly, his voice trembling. "Fellow Daoist, it's true that I am a rogue cultivator, but who said that rogue cultivators can't have jade talismans? Jade talismans themselves have runes, so of course they don't have spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Is there a need for I to say this to fellow Daoist? Who knows if fellow Daoist was sleeping when fellow Daoist's teacher was teaching? The rogue cultivator said without any trace of politeness. Ha 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 tilde. When the surrounding crowd heard this, they all laughed loudly. I am a disciple of Xuanyan school. My Xuanyan school's rules are very strict. Who dares to slack off when the teacher is teaching? The boy defended himself. Xuanyan school? The rogue cultivator was slightly stunned, then laughed. I only said it was possible. I never said that your school wasn't. Fellow Taoists, you can all testify. Of course, we all heard it. A busybody said loudly. I may not have seen a jade talisman, but I swear on my status as a disciple of Xuanyan school that this is truly an ordinary jade pendant, and definitely not some jade talisman. The boy said through gritted teeth. Fellow Daoist, since this jade talisman belongs to I, and I say it's a jade talisman, then it's a jade talisman. Even if it's not a jade talisman, if I want a top-quality spirit stone, then it's worth a top-quality spirit stone. If fellow Daoist wants it, then pay a top-quality spirit stone first. The rogue cultivator was still arrogant as he laughed. The boy looked at the jade pendant in his hand. His hands were trembling as he shouted, I won't give it to you. What are you going to do? Fellow Taoists, take a look. This is how Xuanyan school's disciples do things. Xuanyan school's disciples are bullying others. Xuanyan school's disciples are stealing other people's jade talismans. That rogue cultivator immediately cried out in horror. You shut up. The boy stomped his foot, and the red flush on his face receded, replaced by an ashen expression. How many spirit stones do you want? I definitely don't have that many top-quality spirit stones. The boy whispered. Hihi, it's fine if you don't have spirit stones. Let's see what fellow Daoist has in his storage pouch. As long as it's worth spirit stones. The rogue cultivator narrowed his eyes and said. There are things in my storage pouch that belong to my school. I can't let you see it. The boy said firmly. So it's like that. The rogue cultivator's eyes darted around. He clapped his hands, and a silence talisman appeared. The two of them began to talk. If fellow Daoist doesn't have spirit stones, you can use your school's cultivation method to exchange for it. No one else will know. I will definitely not tell anyone. The rogue cultivator knew that there was a silence talisman, but he still said softly. When the boy heard this, he shook his head. No, that's absolutely impossible. Then, I will take a step back. Xuanyan school is the leading school of alchemy in the country of Xi. If fellow Daoist has your school's Peiyuan pill, foundation establishment pill, and the like, take out a dozen of them. I will exchange this jade talisman with you. Peiyuan pill, foundation establishment pill? A dozen of them? The boy smiled bitterly. Fellow Daoist, you're daydreaming. Do you think I will have them? Then there's no other way. The rogue cultivator spread out his hands helplessly. These are all things I need. I don't need anything else. Fellow Daoist, please return the jade talisman to I. As he spoke, the rogue cultivator stretched out his hand. The boy took half a step back and hid the jade talisman behind him. Oh, right. I almost forgot. If fellow Daoist has your school's pill formula, take out two. It should be fine. The rogue cultivator casually looked behind the boy and suddenly said, Pill formula? The boy's eyes lit up. He thought for a moment and said, Will an incomplete pill formula do? What kind of pill formula? The rogue cultivator's eyes lit up even more as he smiled. The boy shook his head. I don't know. It's just an incomplete. Hey, then I'm very sorry. The rogue cultivator waved his hand and removed the silence talisman. He said loudly, since fellow Daoist isn't willing, then hand over the jade talisman. Perhaps someone else can afford a supreme-grade spirit stone. At this moment, a cultivator wearing a Daoist robe and camouflage walked over from behind the boy. He bowed and said, Fellow Daoist, is this really a jade talisman? Can you let I take a look? Of course, but the jade talisman is in the hands of this Xuanyan cult disciple. He doesn't want to return it to I. The rogue cultivator smiled bitterly at the boy. Oh, Xuanyan cult is a major cult in the country of Xi. Their disciples would definitely not be so rude. I believe this fellow Daoist is in urgent need of this jade talisman. The cultivator said gently, I wonder if this fellow Daoist can let I take a look. The boy looked at the cultivator. After a long while, he raised the jade talisman. However, he still held it in his hand and refused to let go. I see. The cultivator looked carefully for a moment and nodded slightly. He asked, Fellow Daoist, do you not have a supreme-grade spirit stone? The boy nodded. Seeing this, the cultivator took his storage bag and handed it to the rogue cultivator. He smiled and said, Fellow Daoist, this is I's storage bag. Fellow Daoist can take a look. Although it is not worth a supreme-grade spirit stone, it is not much different. Without waiting for the cultivator to finish speaking, the rogue cultivator took the bag and opened it. He smiled and said, It is. Could it be that fellow Daoist wants this jade talisman? That is indeed the case. I like this thing very much and am prepared to exchange the items in the storage bag for this jade talisman. The cultivator said slowly. Fellow Daoist, this is just an ordinary jade talisman, not a jade talisman. You must not be fooled. The boy was very anxious and shouted. Ha, fellow Daoist, the items in the storage bag belong to this poor Daoist. This poor Daoist can do whatever he wants with it. This poor Daoist likes this jade talisman, so it's normal for me to exchange it for it. The cultivator smiled and said, Fellow Daoist, please give this poor Daoist the jade talisman. This. The boy bit his lips with his teeth and was very hesitant. Sigh, fellow Daoist, if no one came to exchange, I could have negotiated with you. Since there is someone who knows the value of this jade talisman, fellow Daoist, please return the jade talisman to I. Xuanyan sect is a large sect and has a good reputation. You must not ruin your reputation because of such a small matter, the rogue cultivator persuaded. But the boy was very hesitant. Oh, if fellow Daoist likes it, of course you can take out a corresponding amount of spirit stones to exchange with this fellow Daoist. After all, fellow Daoist saw this talisman before I. If fellow Daoist takes out spirit stones now, I will not be able to compete with fellow Daoist. Fellow Daoist, can you give me 2 days? I will go to my fellow Daoist to gather some spirit stones. The boy begged. The rogue cultivator glanced and shook his head. I could have done it, but I am afraid it is not possible now. Sure enough, that cultivator smiled and said, If fellow Daoist does not have spirit stones, it is better that you give the jade talisman to I. I am still in a hurry to return to the mountain. But when the boy heard this, his face was extremely ugly. He clenched his little fists and finally gritted his teeth and shouted, Okay. As he spoke, he was about to untie the storage bag at his waist. Seeing this, the rogue cultivator's eyes revealed joy. At this moment, a figure walked over quickly and grabbed the boy's wrist, berating, You boy, why are you wasting time here? Our senior brothers have been waiting for you for a long time. Hurry up and come with me. That boy was shocked at first because his wrist was grabbed because of his uneasiness. Then, when he heard the berating, his face turned ashen. However, when he saw the appearance of the person who came, his face became extremely shocked again and he shouted, You are. Before he could finish speaking, an irresistible force tightened around his wrist, and a sharp pain came from his wrist. Ouch, ouch. The boy could not help but cry out. Who was it? Of course it was Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua first looked at the boy talking to the rogue cultivator with interest. Like many of the cultivators around him, he was a bystander and had long known that the rogue cultivator raised the price because the boy had taken a fancy to the jade pendant and showed that he had a certain relationship with the jade pendant. At first, Xiao Hua did not have the intention to help. After all, the other party was a famous sect and had treated him coldly twice. He had no reason to use his warm face to stick to the other party's butt. But later, when he saw another cultivator stand up and want the ordinary jade pendant, Xiao Hua knew that this person was on the same side as the rogue cultivator. He immediately thought of what happened to Xiao Shenrue, Gong Mingwei, and Zhong Qingxiao at the Yi market last time and felt pity for them. When he saw that the boy actually wanted to open the storage pouch, he was even more shocked. With his knowledge, there was definitely more than just spirit stones and medicinal pills inside the storage pouch. Otherwise, seeing how important the jade pendant was to the boy would have already changed and would not have waited until now. And now, the boy had been deceived by the two people and had lost his mind. If there really was something in the storage pouch that Zun Yang taught him, then the boy would have taken the jade pendant, but what about his own life? Suddenly, Xiao Hua could not stand still. The rogue cultivator on his left and right was only a third-layer qi refining cultivator. Although the other cultivator was wearing a camouflage robe and he could not see their cultivation level, he was afraid that they would not exceed the fourth layer of qi refining. Even if Xiao Hua could not beat them, he could still escape. Therefore, he quickly stepped forward and grabbed the boy's wrist. -5. Chapter 1329. Xiao Hua took advantage of that Xuanyan schoolboy's restless state to grab his wrist. Xiao Hua didn't think too much about it, but as soon as his hand touched that boy's wrist, his fingers immediately moved slightly. His hand exerted force, causing half of the boy's body to go limp and numb. He could only cry out in shock, "You are." Afterwards, he couldn't say anything else. "Mph, if I wasn't here, wouldn't you have made a mistake?" Xiao Hua said coldly, "Why aren't you quickly returning the item?" As he said this, his right hand brushed past the boy's wrist that was holding the jade pendant. As if struck by lightning, the boy's hand loosened. Xiao Hua took the jade pendant and threw it to that cultivator who came later. He said with a sneer, "Since fellow Daoist has taken a fancy to this item and my junior martial brother doesn't have enough spirit stones, of course he'll give it to fellow Daoist." Then, he turned to that individual cultivator and said coldly, "Although my junior martial brother is young and inexperienced, he's still a disciple of Xuanyan school. He won't be deceived by others." That individual cultivator's face was filled with shock, but he still defended himself. "Fellow Daoist, I have a real jade talisman." Wait. How could Xiao Hua say anything more to him? If it wasn't for the fact that he had to pretend and say a few polite words, he would have already pulled the boy away. However, just as he was about to leave, that boy didn't know what he was thinking and struggled with all his might. Unfortunately, the boy's strength was too weak. Xiao Hua's hand was like cast iron and didn't move at all. The boy couldn't help but blush and shout, "Who the hell are you?" Xiao Hua was very anxious. He reached out and slapped the boy's face. He berated, "Don't talk too much. Wait until we return to the mountain and I'll settle accounts with you. You dare hit me." The boy was stunned. Although Xiao Hua held back, there was still a 5-finger mark left on the boy's face. It was extremely obvious. Xiao Hua didn't dare to stop. Taking advantage of the boy's daze, he pulled the boy up from the ground and quickly walked outside. As he walked, he scolded, "Everyone, disperse. What's there to see?" The surrounding people saw Xiao Hua grab the fourth-layer qi refining boy and slap him across the face. The boy didn't even have a chance to resist, so of course they wouldn't take Xiao Hua's second-layer qi refining level seriously. When they heard Xiao Hua's reprimand, they all hurriedly stepped aside and gradually dispersed. Xiao Hua walked very fast. He was familiar with the surroundings. After turning a few corners and seeing that there was no one around, he looked back and saw that there was no one around. Seeing that there was no one around, he quickly let go of his hand. The boy was still dizzy from the beating. He had just woken up when Xiao Hua let go of his hand. The soreness and numbness in his body also disappeared, and his hands and feet regained their freedom. The boy immediately jumped up and cursed, "You shameless loose cultivator, you actually dared to disturb this young master's business. You actually dared to beat this young master. If this young master doesn't take your life, then this young master's surname isn't Xiao." As he spoke, the boy slapped his storage pouch and took out several yellow talismans. "Fellow Daoist, you must not make a mistake. This is Jingbua City's Yi Ji. If you dare to attack, how can the disciples of Jingbua City forgive you? Even if you're a disciple of Xuanyan School, I'm afraid you won't have a good end." Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed and hastily retreated. You! The boy's yellow talisman had already been activated, but after hearing Xiao Hua's words, he immediately realized that fighting was prohibited in Jinghua City. This was something his master had instructed him to do before he left the mountain. Wouldn't his yellow talisman immediately provoke endless trouble? Humph, this young master knows you. Just wait and see. The boy angrily put away the yellow talisman and said, I know you're a loose cultivator abandoned by the heavens. One day you'll definitely, Ari, fellow Daoist, I's good intentions have been taken as ill intent by you. Could it be that you've really been blinded by lard? Didn't you see that the stall owner was in cahoots with the cultivator who came later? Xiao Hua smiled wryly. He had no choice but to stop and explain, if you don't believe me, go back and find your senior brother. Have him look again and you'll know. The boy wasn't stupid. It was just that when he was in the middle of the situation just now, his mind had reached a dead end. Now that he thought about it, how could he not know? He couldn't help but cry out in alarm. His forehead was covered with sweat, and his small hand naturally went to protect the storage pouch at his waist. All right, since fellow Daoist knows, I'll leave first. Fellow Daoist has the protection of your sect, so you don't need to be afraid of being targeted. I, however, am very afraid. Xiao Hua cupped his hands in salute and turned to leave. The boy clenched his teeth and opened his mouth as if to call out to Xiao Hua, but not a single word came out. At this moment, a drawn-out voice was heard. What? You beat up a disciple of my Xuanyan school and want to leave so easily? When Xiao Hua heard this, he was greatly alarmed. His legs were somewhat weak, and his figure stopped in place. He didn't know whether he should escape or not. Senior brother. Behind Xiao Hua, the boy called out timidly, his pleasant surprise mixed with fear. Sigh, Xiao Hua wailed from the bottom of his heart and turned around. Right behind the boy, a cultivator dressed in camouflage slowly walked over. That cultivator walked closer and reached out to take off the camouflage, revealing his true appearance. It was precisely that Xuanyan School's 11th level Qi refinement cultivator that Xiao Hua saw outside Jinghua City. Greetings, fellow Daoist. Xiao Hua didn't dare to approach and cupped his hands in salute. That cultivator ignored him and walked in front of the boy. He said coldly, Xiao Mao, do you know your wrongs? Senior brother, disciple. Disciple knows his wrongs. The boy named Xiao Mao shrunk his neck and bowed. What wrongs? Disciple, shouldn't have argued with other cultivators over a small thing, Xiao Mao said in a low voice. Is that all? Xiao Mao's senior brother snorted coldly and said, You've been wandering around Yi City these past few days, and I have been following you. Even the matter just now, I also saw it clearly. Do you think I don't know what's in your storage pouch? With a plop, Xiao Mao knelt on the ground and rushed to say, Senior brother, that jade pendant is disciples. Xiao Mao's senior brother interrupted him and said coldly, I don't care what that jade pendant is. Even if you gave all your spirit stones and medicinal pills to others, I still wouldn't care. I just wanted to see if you would really give the things in your storage pouch to others. At this point, Xiao Mao's senior brother glanced at Xiao Hua. Fortunately, your luck isn't bad. There was actually someone who helped you. Otherwise, your fate, do you know? Disciple. Disciple knows. Disciple also doesn't know why, but Disciple was bewitched at that time. Xiao Mao didn't dare to get up and said in a low voice. It's good that you know. This time, you left the mountain to gain experience, and your results didn't pass. After returning to the mountain, I will tell your master the result. When you return today, you and the other senior brothers will first return to Xuanyan Mountain. After Xiao Mao's senior brother finished speaking, he looked at Xiao Hua and asked, This person, is the heaven-forsaken loose cultivator you spoke of? Seeing that you didn't resist, you know him? Disciple, can't be considered to know him. We just met when we entered the city. At that time, he was right in front of us. Xiao Mao replied with a depressed expression. Oh. Xiao Mao's senior brother was slightly surprised. He raised his eyes and said, Fellow Daoist, don't you want to take down the bewitching insect? Sigh. Hearing this, Xiao Hua still sighed in his heart and took down the bewitching insect. Oh, it's you. Xiao Mao's senior brother clearly also had an impression of Xiao Hua. I am Zhuo Qingyuan of Xuanyan Mountain. How should I address fellow Daoist? I am Xiao Hua. Greetings, fellow Daoist Zhuo. Xiao Hua cupped his hands. Xiao Hua. Xiao Mao? Zhuo Qingyuan asked curiously. You know Xiao Mao? But what's the connection? Xiao Hua shook his head. I am just a loose cultivator. How can I know a disciple of Xuanyan Mountain? It's all just a coincidence. He, coincidence. Do you think I will believe that? Zhuo Qingyuan had a pensive look on his face. With your low cultivation, you actually dared to step forward bravely. If you have nothing to do with Xiao Mao, then, how is this possible? Sigh, I just saw a little boy like him being bullied and felt indignant in my heart. I don't have any other thoughts. Xiao Hua said with a bitter smile. Could it be that you didn't see him as a disciple of Xuanyan Mountain and wanted to curry favor with Xuanyan Mountain? Or perhaps you want to obtain some benefits from Xiao Mao? Xiao Hua's eyes turned and he said with a smile, if fellow Daoist Zhuo has such thoughts, I naturally welcome them. I wonder how fellow Daoist will thank I? What benefits does fellow Daoist want to obtain? Naturally, it's what loose cultivators want. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and said calmly. Ha ha ha, then what's the difference between fellow Daoist and those two loose cultivators just now? Zhuo Qingyuan laughed loudly. Could it be that there aren't two people in this trap, but three? I only have one person in this trap. Where did two people come from? Three people? Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, if fellow Daoist doesn't have any techniques or the like to thank I will pretend I didn't hear it. Farewell. Finished speaking, Xiao Hua turned around and prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, Zhuo Qingyuan sneered and said, how can my Xuanyan Mountain's disciple be bullied by others as they wish? Even though fellow Daoist redeemed my Xuanyan Mountain's reputation and can be considered to have saved my junior brother's life, you slapped my Xuanyan Mountain's disciple's face. Do you want to leave so easily? You. Xiao Hua stared blankly and argued, this isn't. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, Xiao Hua only felt a cold wind in front of him. Without waiting for him to react, the image of a palm swatted over. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed and hurriedly dodged. However, Zhuo Qingyuan was an 11th level qi refining cultivator. Compared to Xiao Hua's cultivation, Zhuo Qingyuan's was more than a star and half a drop higher. How could Xiao Hua dodge in such a hurry? With a pa sound, Xiao Hua did his utmost to dodge, but that palm still brushed against Xiao Hua's cheek a little less than half. Hey! Your magic power seems to be higher than the 2nd level of qi refining? Zhuo Qingyuan cried out in alarm. Even though he didn't really use all of his magic power, he also didn't expect that Xiao Hua could easily dodge most of his palm. Senior brother. Xiao Mao finally came to his senses and knelt on the ground as he begged. As expected of a prestigious sect, as expected of benevolence, righteousness, and morality, as expected of the importance of faith. Xiao Hua said as expected 3 times in a row and turned around in anger. He didn't look back and hurriedly left. Fellow Daoist Xiao, catch. Only after Xiao Hua had walked far away did Zhuo Qingyuan let out a long laugh. He waved his hand and a scarlet radiance flew in front of Xiao Hua. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come and vote for it. -5. Chapter 1330. A crimson light flew in front of Xiao Hua. Zhuo Qingyuan shouted from behind him, fellow Daoist Xiao, this is I's messaging talisman. I know exactly what fellow Daoist I did. If fellow Daoist needs anything from me, please send a message to I. Xiao Hua was furious. He helped them out of goodwill, yet half of his face was swept away. Hearing this, he unconsciously turned around and sneered, fellow Daoist Zhuo, take back your goodwill. I still have the other half of my face. However, when he turned around, Zhuo Qingyuan and Xiao Mao had already disappeared. Damn it, Is this great sect so stingy? Xiao Hua let out a long sigh. I beat up your junior martial brother only as a temporary measure. Since you knew, why did you pretend to use the same method to return the favor? You clearly wanted to thank me, yet you said you had no other choice. What the hell is this? Looking at the flashing messaging talisman, Xiao Hua reached for it and threw it into the space behind his head, thinking, this Shui Qingyuan is more honest than that Mingsue Mountains Shi Wuming. He really gave me a messaging talisman. If I really have something to tell him, he probably won't refuse. Who knows? Besides, if I have something to deal with, why would I look for someone else for no reason? I'll make Xuanyan School owe me a favor for the rest of my life. Xiao Hua thought fiercely. Xiao Hua seemed to have been provoked by Xuanyan School's Shui Qingyuan. He walked around randomly, buying everything he saw without hesitation. Not long after, there were more ground escape talismans, Vajra talismans, and so on in the space. He even bought some ordinary medicinal pills. As he bought more and more things, the anger in his heart gradually dissipated. Using spirit stones to exchange for a happy mood, sure enough, this was an unbreakable truth. After his anger subsided, Xiao Hua no longer had the mood to wander around Yiji. After buying the necessary materials to refine the yellow talismans, he turned around and went back. As he turned around, he saw a stall to the side. On it were some medicinal pills and yellow talismans for refining pills. Xiao Hua's eyes turned, and he walked up, cupping his hands and saying, "Fellow Daoist, please." The stall owner was a female cultivator around 40 years old. She had a kind look on her face, which was also the main reason why Xiao Hua came here. "Fellow Daoist, do you need the medicinal pills listed above?" The female cultivator asked with a smile. "That's right." Xiao Hua picked up a few cheap pills and bought them. After handing over the spirit stones, Xiao Hua coughed and smiled apologetically. "I have a difficult matter that I need to ask fellow Daoist for advice." "Really? Fellow Daoist, please speak." The female cultivator seemed to be very easy to talk to and replied, "I want to know, where can I exchange for a pill furnace for alchemy?" Although Xiao Hua's face was hidden in the fog, he still felt a little feverish. Pill furnace? The female cultivator was stunned. She stared vigilantly at Xiao Hua for a moment, then looked left and right. "Fellow Daoist, you're a rogue cultivator, right?" "Yes, I am." "Then I advise fellow Daoist to find a sect to rely on. Only within a sect can you find pill furnaces for alchemy. Where else can you exchange for pill furnaces?" The female cultivator smiled and said, "Don't think that Yiji has everything. It's impossible to find the cultivation methods, pill recipes, pill furnaces, and talisman crafting methods that rogue cultivators need. Could it be, there's no room for exchange at all?" Xiao Hua didn't give up and asked, "Hey, even if there's a pill furnace, think about it. People from cultivation sects, cultivation families, and Jinghua City, who wouldn't covet it? But you're just a small rogue cultivator, how can you snatch it from them? I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but the wealth of my sect is far from what a rogue cultivator like you can compare to." The female cultivator dispelled Xiao Hua's wishful thinking without any trace of politeness. "All right, thank you for your guidance." Xiao Hua cupped his hands in thanks and turned to leave. "Hey, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." After Xiao Hua walked far away, the female cultivator shook her head and muttered to herself, "Pill furnaces, how could they be so easy to obtain and use?" Ari, as expected, it seems that this matter of pill refinement still depends on luck. How could Xiao Hua care about the opinions of others after he left? He had already asked fellow Daoist Liang of Mo Spirit Herb Hall a few days ago, and fellow Daoist Liang's answer was the same as this female cultivator's. However, Xiao Hua's wicked heart didn't give up. He wanted to see if there was any possibility of obtaining a pill furnace at Yiji. In addition, he had made a certain amount of progress in refining yellow talismans, so he unconsciously placed greater hope in pill refinement. Unfortunately, reality was very cruel, and the path of pill refinement couldn't be taken for the time being. Xiao Hua sighed. He didn't care about any of the stalls left and right. He found a secluded place and took down the maze amulet, then strolled out of Yiji. Right after Xiao Hua left Yiji, a fourth-layer aura refining cultivator hurried over from not too far away. That cultivator had an anxious expression on his face and looked very flustered. However, as soon as he saw Xiao Hua, his face lit up with joy. He practically ran over to Xiao Hua, cupped his hands in greeting and said anxiously, "Are you fellow Daoist Xiao Hua?" Xiao Hua's head was lowered as he pondered over the pill furnace. At this time, he heard someone call out his name. He was extremely astonished. When he raised his head to look, he saw a square-faced cultivator with sparse eyebrows. He wasn't familiar with this cultivator, so he couldn't help but cup his hands and say, "I am Xiao Hua." "I wonder, how did fellow Daoist know me? I am Zhong Zhihao." The cultivator cupped his fists and said, "Fellow Daoist Xiao, did you forget that when you followed fellow Daoist Qing Feng and fellow Daoist Qing to Huayun Park, it was I who brought fellow Daoist Xiao Fengyu and fellow Daoist Han Fei to Huayun Park?" When Xiao Hua heard this, he repeatedly nodded and said embarrassedly, "Ayo, that's right. That person is fellow Daoist Zhong. My apologies, I was thinking about something and neglected fellow Daoist Zhong." Soon after, Xiao Hua glanced sideways at Yiji and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Zhong also came to Yiji? I'm afraid you're a bit late." "No, no." Zhong Zhihao hurriedly waved his hands and said with a smile, "I came because fellow Daoist Ma Qingcheng asked me to look for fellow Daoist Xiao." "Ah, Senior Ma." Xiao Hua was overjoyed. Needless to say, there was definitely some progress in the matter of him joining the Heaven Forsaken. He immediately asked, "I wonder why Senior Ma is looking for I?" But then Xiao Hua asked curiously, "Doesn't Senior Ma have I's summoning talisman? Why don't you use it?" Fellow Daoist Ma has already used the summoning talisman. However, the summoning talisman can't fly out. In this case, fellow Daoist Xiao has either left Jingbua City or is in a place where the summoning talisman can't fly to. Zhong Zhihao patiently explained, "But there are many places in Jingbua City that can block the summoning talisman. This Yiji is one of them." Fellow Daoist Ma guessed that fellow Daoist Xiao is most likely to come to Yiji, so he asked I to look for fellow Daoist Xiao. "Oh, so it's like that." Xiao Hua understood and nodded. "Then, why is Senior Ma looking for I?" "This. I saw that fellow Daoist Ma and fellow Daoist Qing have a few talisman masters with them. I'm afraid it's about fellow Daoist Xiao joining the Heaven Forsaken. Fellow Daoist Ma didn't say, so I can't speak blindly." Zhong Zhihao said apologetically. "Is that so? That's great." Xiao Hua said with surprise, "Fellow Daoist Zhong, please wait a moment. I'll send a summoning talisman to ask later." "Haha, I'm afraid fellow Daoist Xiao will be disappointed." Zhong Zhihao looked at the sky and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Ma, fellow Daoist Qing, and many other fellow Daoists have probably already left the city. Today, the important members of the Heaven Forsaken will go outside. I made an appointment with fellow Daoist Ma. If I can't find fellow Daoist Xiao, fellow Daoist Ma and the others won't wait outside the city. The next time they come back will probably be a month later." "Ah, a month." Xiao Hua was a little anxious and hurriedly said, "Then, I'll have to ask fellow Daoist Zhong to lead the way. Let's go quickly. Don't let Senior Ma and Senior Qing wait too long." Zhong Zhihao nodded and said, "I have the same intention." As he spoke, he led the way out of Jingbua City. Xiao Hua followed closely, but he was a little uneasy in his heart. These days, he had been refining fireball talismans and confinement talismans. However, he used his unique technique. Although he also practiced drawing fireball talismans with a talisman brush, but he didn't make much progress. Now that he had to pass Heaven Forsaken's test, he was a little regretful that he shouldn't have spent more time on fireball talismans. "What should I do?" Xiao Hua frowned and followed Zhong Zhihao with his head lowered. He was worried as he walked. Walking out of Jingbua City from Yiji wasn't through the city gate that Xiao Hua used to enter the city. After Zhong Zhihao took Xiao Hua out of Jingbua City, he used a flight talisman to take Xiao Hua in another direction. Xiao Hua didn't dare to reveal his flying speed and slowly followed behind Zhong Zhihao. Zhong Zhihao also didn't panic. He flew with Xiao Hua's speed for the time it took to eat a meal. Seeing that the sun was about to set, he landed. Xiao Hua looked around. It was all dead wood and brambles. He didn't see anyone. He was a little surprised and asked, "Fellow Daoist Zhong, how come? I don't see Senior Qing and the others." "Yeah, I'm also puzzled. This is the place we agreed on. It's not yet time, they shouldn't have left." Zhong Zhihao looked around and was also puzzled. He thought for a moment and said, "Fellow Daoist Xiao, please wait a moment. In a moment, I will send a message talisman to ask." As he spoke, Zhong Zhihao patted his storage bag and took out a scarlet-yellow talisman. "I'll have to trouble fellow Daoist Zhong." Xiao Hua cupped his hands and smiled. Then he looked around. This was a desolate mountain valley. Brambles covered the ground. Most of the nearby trees were withered. The branches that slanted upwards slightly swayed in the twilight sky. Xiao Hua felt it was a little strange. Senior Qing really knows how to pick a place. Apart from falling from the sky, no one would. Suddenly, Xiao Hua's heart jumped. A thought suddenly popped into his mind. This kind of place is very dangerous. Isn't it a good place to kill and steal? When Xiao Hua thought of this, a trace of cold sweat immediately appeared on his back. He hurriedly wanted to turn around. Unfortunately, he was still too late. Right next to Xiao Hua, Zhong Zhihao's right hand was holding a scarlet message talisman. His left hand had already patted the scarlet message talisman the moment Xiao Hua turned around. A confinement talisman flew out. Magic power flowed out and the confinement talisman emitted a faint brilliance. It rushed towards Xiao Hua, who was just about to turn around. -5. Chapter 1331. Xiao Hua was startled, and just as he was about to turn around, the confinement talisman had already fallen. A thin brilliance emerged from Xiao Hua's body, confining Xiao Hua's 4 limbs. Xiao Hua's 4 limbs exerted all their strength to twist, but he was unable to break free. What are you doing?" Xiao Hua blurted out in shock. "Ha ha ha!" Seeing this, Zhong Zhihao clapped his hands and laughed. "What a good middle-grade confinement talisman. This effect is simply not inferior to a high-grade confinement talisman. I didn't expect fellow Daoist Xiao to have such a good method. If I wasn't in a hurry, I would really want to know where fellow Daoist got so many middle-grade confinement talismans." Soon after, Zhong Zhihao took a step forward and took away Xiao Hua's storage pouch. He sneered, "I already confined you, what do you think I want to do? Isn't that really childish?" When he opened the storage pouch and saw a pile of yellow talismans and a pile of spirit stones, his eyes unconsciously lit up, and he laughed again. "You brat, you really know how to get rich. I don't know where you got these fireball talismans and confinement talismans, but you actually earned so many spirit stones. What a pity, you have spirit stones but don't have the life to spend them, so you benefited I for nothing." While speaking, Zhong Zhihao took out his own storage pouch to transfer the spirit stones and other items. Xiao Hua had already recovered his calm at this time. His eyes coldly looked at Zhong Zhihao, but his arms slightly exerted force. He already had the experience of breaking through with force before, and he also broke free from this confinement talisman. However, the confinement talisman last time was obviously a low-grade one, far less powerful than today's confinement talisman. Sigh, this confinement talisman, listening to Zhong Zhihao's words, I refined it myself. I'm the one who's trapped myself in a cocoon. Xiao Hua secretly complained, his arms still slowly increasing the force. The number of spirit stones is wrong. After Zhong Zhihao took all the spirit stones from Xiao Hua's storage pouch, he was slightly dazed. He raised his head and said, "Didn't you sell more than 200 confinement talismans at the stall just now? How come there are only so few spirit stones? Also, I followed you for a few days and saw you harvest a lot of spirit stones every day. Where did you put them? Could it be that you put them in an inn? You're quite cautious." As he spoke, Zhong Zhihao searched his storage bag again. Not long after, he found a yellow talisman. He sneered and said, The inn you're staying in is actually better than the one I'm staying in. Chimpage. Oh, right, fellow Daoist Xiao, do you want to live? Do you want to live to die? Or do you want to be burned to ashes by my fire talisman? As he spoke, Zhong Zhihao took out a fireball talisman from Xiao Hua's storage pouch. Urging his magic power, a small fireball was born in his hand. You to let to die to Xiao to die. Aren't you afraid that I'll tell fellow Daoist Qing? To s what is I to die to die? Zhong Zhihao said with a smile, heaven forsaken doesn't stop fighting. Even if fellow Daoist Qing knows that I killed you, he has nothing to say. To this to die, to die, to, Daoist, Xiao, to Xiao. What if this poor Daoist wants to live? How could Xiao Hua believe Zhong Zhihao's words? He asked with contempt. You to say. To. Tell I how you got these fire talismans and confinement talismans. Maybe I can consider it, Zhong Zhihao said with a smile. I followed you for many days and only saw you between the inn and Yi Ji. I didn't see you go anywhere else. The origin of these yellow talismans is so hard to understand. Could it be that you've been keeping them in your storage pouch for a long time? PH, I'm afraid you won't be able to figure out the origin of these two talismans. Xiao Hua sneered. Ha, you want to threaten I with this? Zhong Zhihao looked at Xiao Hua with extreme contempt and threw the fireball over. It spun on top of Xiao Hua's head. If you are tactful, tell me the origin of this yellow talisman and give this poor Daoist a way to make money. This poor Daoist might be soft-hearted and let you go. If you want to use this to threaten this poor Daoist. These fire talismans and confinement talismans were made by I myself. Xiao Hua took a deep breath and channeled all the strength in his body to his arms. His tone was still calm as he said, Ha. Zhong Zhihao laughed out loud, as if he'd heard the funniest thing in the world. He bent over, one of his hands slightly raised, pointing at Xiao Hua. Out of breath, he said, You're only at the second layer of qi refining? You actually refined a high-grade fireball talisman? You think, you're Mosang Mountain's Mosang Elder. Seeing this, Xiao Hua knew he had a chance. Thus, he raised his arms and shouted, That's right. This sound almost deafened Zhong Zhihao's ears, and Xiao Hua's entire body strength was also exerted through his two arms along with this loud shout. Xiao Hua's upper body, along with the forceful lifting of his two arms, a burst of brilliance flashed. Rip! A crisp sound like tearing silk rang out. The upper body imprisonment talisman was actually torn apart by Xiao Hua's two arms, and along with the flickering brilliance of his upper body, the brilliance of Xiao Hua's entire body also flickered a few times before completely disappearing. The entire imprisonment talisman was broken apart by force. You! Zhong Zhihao bent over, as if he still hadn't recovered from his laughter. However, when he saw Xiao Hua actually break the confinement talisman in a short moment, the smile on his face froze. He only cried out a single word before immediately coming to his senses. Before he could straighten his body, he moved his finger and channeled his magic power. The fireball flying in the air flew towards Xiao Hua's head. The fireball broke free from Zhong Zhihao's control and suddenly enlarged, sucking in all the surrounding spiritual energy. Xiao Hua broke free from the confinement and his heart was very calm. Seeing the fireball rapidly flying over, his complexion changed greatly. He had seen the power of his high-grade fireball talisman in the yellow talisman shop. If he was hit by this fireball, wouldn't he immediately turn into ashes? In a hurry, he didn't care about anything else. He used his hand to brush the side of his ear and took out an icicle talisman from his space. He channeled his magic power and a blue brilliance also met the fireball. Within the brilliance was a long ice spike condensed from spiritual energy. Sizzle, like snow water being poured into a pot of oil, the ice spike pierced into the fireball. As the ice spike melted, it let out an ear-piercing sound. The sound became increasingly urgent and the fireball also gradually shrunk. However, that icicle talisman was refined by someone else and couldn't compare to Xiao Hua's fireball talisman. When the ice spike on the icicle talisman was exhausted, the fireball was still not small. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The fireball fell on the ground and blew up a rather large hole in the ground. Ah! Zhong Zhihao was clearly shocked by the might of this fireball talisman and was somewhat dazed. Xiao Hua was just the opposite. After he sent out the icicle talisman, he didn't pause in the slightest. He channeled his magic power and took advantage of the fact that the flight talisman still hadn't lost its effect to quickly fly in front of Zhong Zhihao. Zhong Zhihao threw out the fireball and had already straightened up. At this moment, his face was filled with astonishment. He had just woken up from the enormous might of the fireball talisman and didn't have time to think about how Xiao Hua broke free from the confinement talisman. He also didn't have time to think about where Xiao Hua took out the icicle talisman. He also didn't have time to think about why Xiao Hua inexplicably rushed over. Xiao Hua had already rushed to a distance of 3 feet in front of him. "You're courting death." Zhong Zhihao threw all of his astonishment to the side. He slapped his hand and took out another fireball talisman. He channeled his magic power and blocked in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua was helpless. How could he still dare to touch this kind of fireball talisman that he refined himself? His figure hastily flashed to the side, wanting to dodge. But no matter how fast he flew, it couldn't compare to the channeling of magic power. Zhong Zhihao grinned nastily. That fireball followed like a shadow and flew in front of Xiao Hua's face. Xiao Hua thought for a moment. He brushed his hand and took out 2 yellow talismans from the space. One was the icicle talisman, which he stabbed towards the fireball talisman. The other was the weak water talisman. He channeled his magic power and stuck it on his head. A water blue brilliance flashed and covered Xiao Hua's entire body. Looking at Zhong Zhihao again, he wasn't the slightest bit slower than Xiao Hua. After the fireball talisman was thrown out, he similarly slapped his storage pouch, and a yellow talisman also landed on his body. A yellow light flashed. It was an iron cloak talisman, wrapping Zhong Zhihao's entire body. "I would like to see just how many yellow talismans you have." Zhong Zhihao's body floated into the air. He sneered and waved his hand again. A yellow talisman shot out. That yellow talisman first burned like the fireball talisman. A dark red flame blocked in front of Xiao Hua. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to take out the icicle talisman, that flame exploded with a bang and sealed the space around Xiao Hua's body. It was like a sea of fire had covered Xiao Hua. "Little thing, you actually wasted one of I's high-level fire net talismans." Zhong Zhihao looked at the sea of fire that lingered in front of him. There was a trace of reluctance in his eyes. He couldn't clearly see Xiao Hua's figure in the light of the fire, but Zhong Zhihao absolutely believed that with Xiao Hua's second-level refinement magic power, he absolutely wouldn't be able to dodge this fire net. "That's right, this guy keeps moving in front of me. What's he doing? Could it be that he wants to snatch away the storage bag in my hands?" Zhong Zhihao's eyes flashed with a fiery light. He was somewhat bewildered. Just when Zhong Zhihao was puzzled, he suddenly felt a trace of wind behind him. He immediately had a startled realization in his heart. Someone wants to be the Oriole. After a startled realization, Zhong Zhihao didn't dare to be negligent. He also didn't turn his head. He slapped his storage bag and at the same time threw out the fireball talisman. His figure also turned and dodged to the side. Right behind Zhong Zhihao, 2 fireballs collided together, letting out an incomparably loud rumbling sound. "Who?" Zhong Zhihao turned around as he flew. Before he could finish speaking, a cold voice rang out extremely close behind him. "Nonsense, besides I, who else could it be?" "Xiao Hua." Zhong Zhihao heard and his eyes opened wide. "How did you run behind me?" What answered him wasn't Xiao Hua's voice. Instead, it was an incomparably enormous force that smashed into the back of Zhong Zhihao's neck. Bang! A loud sound rang out. Zhong Zhihao felt a burst of dizziness and his vision blurred. His figure practically flipped in the air. At the same time, the brilliance of the iron cloak talisman on his body flickered. It looked like it was about to collapse. "Body cultivator!" Zhong Zhihao shouted loudly. His figure barely stabilized. He slapped his storage bag and shot out another iron cloak talisman. At the same time, his other hand wasn't slow either. He brought out another fire net talisman and threw it behind him. -5. Chapter 1332. He, fellow Daoist Zhong. Can you hit I? Xiao Hua's voice sounded behind Zhong Zhihao, but when Zhong Zhihao's fire net found Xiao Hua's voice quickly turned to Zhong Zhihao's other side. It was faster than Zhong Zhihao expected. So fast. Zhong Zhihao was shocked. His mind moved quickly, and his magic power spread out. That fire net flew towards Xiao Hua's voice. But just as the fire net was released, a black shadow flew at extreme speed from Zhong Zhihao's side. It was as fast as an arrow. Zhong Zhihao's heart jumped. He couldn't care about the fire net. He urged his flying talisman to dodge, but that huge force came again like a mountain. This time, Zhong Zhihao saw it clearly. The origin of that force was actually Xiao Hua's fist. He finally understood why Xiao Hua wanted to fly in front of him from the beginning, and not compete with yellow talismans like other cultivators. Pa. There was another muffled sound. Xiao Hua's fist hit Zhong Zhihao's armpit without hesitation. Although the majority of the strength of the fist was blocked by the iron cloak talisman, a faint force was transmitted to Zhong Zhihao's body. Zhong Zhihao's qi and blood were tumbling, and the mana in his body was in chaos. In particular, the brilliance of the iron cloak talisman began to flicker, and it was about to collapse. What level of body cultivator is this guy? He actually hid it so deeply. Zhong Zhihao only had time to be secretly shocked in his heart. Before he could say anything, his two hands were the same as before. One hand took out an iron cloak talisman, and the other hand shot out a fireball talisman. Only this time, the fireball talisman didn't go far. It swayed around his body, waiting for Xiao Hua to attack. Xiao Hua's flying speed was indeed fast, but it wasn't as fast as Zhong Zhihao's vision. Just as he threw out his fist, he saw the fireball flying towards him. Xiao Hua didn't dare to resist and could only dodge. Zhong Zhihao also learned to be shrewd. He flew up and pulled apart the distance between him and Xiao Hua. He tried his best to avoid letting Xiao Hua get close to him. At the same time, he wasn't in a hurry to use the fireball talisman. He used it as a defensive measure, blocking between himself and Xiao Hua. Seeing this, Xiao Hua was helpless. This was exactly what he had told Xiao Yuhong before. Although his method of using force to break the spell was unexpected, if he didn't succeed in one strike and others found out, then he would completely lose the initiative. No one would foolishly stand there and wait for Xiao Hua to attack. Not to mention the twin bluebears from before, but this Zhong Zhihao only had a cultivation of the fourth layer of the Qi refining realm. His flying speed wasn't as fast as Xiao Hua's. With just the iron cloak talisman and fireball talisman, Xiao Hua was unable to take his life. The most hateful thing was that Zhong Zhihao actually took the fireball talisman refined by Xiao Hua. The might of that fireball talisman was truly terrifying. Xiao Hua didn't feel it before, but once he encountered a fight, he immediately discovered the benefits of this high-grade fireball talisman. And this kind of situation was precisely what Xiao Hua was most worried about. Admittedly, his life was no longer in danger and he could use the flying talisman to escape at any time, but some of his secrets were exposed in front of Zhong Zhihao. Not to mention whether or not Zhong Zhihao suspected the origin of the two icicle talismans just now, the secret of using force to break the spell and flying speed absolutely couldn't be leaked. He absolutely believed that as long as Zhong Zhihao escaped today, he would definitely gather some loose cultivators from Heaven Forsaken to find trouble with him. Not to mention his situation after joining Heaven Forsaken, even if the twin bluebears and the others knew about this matter, they would definitely contact him. Heaven Forsaken didn't refrain from fighting and also respected talisman masters, but, under the covetous eyes of others, how could he peacefully cultivate? Since Zhong Zhihao dared to make a move against this young master absolutely has no reason to spare his life. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes, his figure floating in the air, coldly looking at Zhong Zhihao. At this time, Zhong Zhihao felt that he had a countermeasure and gradually calmed down, but the expression on his face was uncertain, unknown as to what he was thinking. But, this iron cloak talisman, this young master's fist can't break it. I'm afraid it will have to be the same as before, hitting the same point multiple times. Xiao Hua thought, slapping his hand. Another flying talisman hit his body. Fellow Daoist Xiao. Seeing this, Zhong Zhihao hurriedly called out, everything is a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Xiao Hua sneered, his figure spread out, flying towards Zhong Zhihao at extreme speed. Zhong Zhihao hurriedly urged his magic power, controlling the fireball to block in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua changed his direction, swayed a few times, and spent another 2 icicle talismans to get close to Zhong Zhihao's side. This time, Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his fist, hitting Zhong Zhihao's back twice in a row, almost breaking the Iron Cloak talisman again. Unfortunately, at this time, Zhong Zhihao's Iron Cloak talisman and Fireball talisman flew out again, blocking Xiao Hua's fists. Alas, what a pity, if only I had a confinement talisman. Xiao Hua was somewhat regretful. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have sold the confinement talisman, but then he smiled bitterly. Confinement talismans are useful, but Zhong Zhihao isn't just standing there, it's very difficult to hit him. If the confinement talisman can imprison Zhong Zhihao, what's the use of force to break through? Wouldn't a fireball talisman be enough? If only I had a little more strength. Xiao Hua secretly sighed. Huh. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was slightly surprised, seeming to have thought of something. However, at this time, Zhong Zhihao opposite Xiao Hua was already aware that something was wrong. Under Xiao Hua's fast flight, he could only parry without the power to fight back. At this time, he still had a lot of Iron Cloak talismans, and even more Fireball talismans, but, if he purely defended, his Iron Cloak talismans would run out sooner or later. Without this Iron Cloak talisman, he didn't doubt that as long as Xiao Hua's unparalleled strength touched his body, he would only have one outcome, to be beaten into a pile of meat paste. As for the Fireball talisman, although its power is great, it's also very easy to dodge, unless it's sprinkled in large quantities. But if it's sprinkled in large quantities, with Zhong Zhihao's cultivation base, he wouldn't be able to control it very well. In addition to Xiao Hua's fast flight, Zhong Zhihao didn't have the confidence to hit Xiao Hua. Very naturally, Zhong Zhihao's heart beat a retreat. Zhong Zhihao's heart retreated, he also shot out a flying talisman, his figure rapidly retreated, flying in the direction of Jingbua City. Where do you think you're going? Xiao Hua was very anxious, he shouted, his figure didn't hesitate, in a few breaths' time, he chased after him, blocking Zhong Zhihao's path. Zhong Zhihao didn't answer, he clapped his hands, a yellow talisman shot out, and sneered, although fellow Daoist Xiao has the means, if I want to leave, can you stop me? That yellow talisman was a fireball again, Xiao Hua was helpless, he still dodged, and Zhong Zhihao also slightly dodged, fleeing into the distance again. Xiao Hua shot down the fireball and chased after him again. The two were entangled for a moment. Xiao Hua once again found an opportunity to hit Zhong Zhihao. Just like before, he used the Iron Cloak talisman again, he still saved his life. Therefore, the two people, one chased and one fled, flew for a while. Xiao Hua still didn't have a way to kill the enemy, he couldn't help but feel anxious. Zhong Zhihao, on the other hand, became more and more relaxed. When he saw Xiao Hua's fist strike again, he sneered, and shot out a yellow talisman. Brat, you're going too far. If I don't show my power, you think I'm a sick cat. That yellow talisman flew in the air, it immediately turned into a long sword, directly piercing Xiao Hua's fist. Seeing the flying sword talisman, the long sword formed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth flashed across Xiao Hua's mind like lightning. Immediately, Xiao Hua woke up, grasping what he was thinking just now. Seeing the sharp sword piercing towards him, Xiao Hua hurriedly dodged, but this flying sword wasn't as sharp as the fireball. The sword tip was sharp, and its speed was incomparable. Zhong Zhihao suddenly threw it out, with the intention of catching Xiao Hua off guard. Xiao Hua could only barely dodge the fist, that flying sword slanted and pierced Xiao Hua's shoulder. The weak water talisman's brilliance flashed, under the flying sword, it only lasted for a moment before it was pierced. Xiao Hua's figure hurriedly moved, dodging to the side, the flying sword following behind him like a shadow. Ha ha ha! Seeing this, Zhong Zhihao's figure laughed loudly in the air. Taking advantage of Xiao Hua's weak water talisman again, His fire net talisman also blocked in front of Xiao Hua. At the same time, several fireball talismans were also thrown out by Zhong Zhihao with heartache, and Zhong Zhihao himself immediately flew into the distance, as if he didn't want to see the results of the fire net talisman and fireball talisman. Bang! 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 A burst of sounds rang out, all of them exploding under the fire net. Xiao Hua was in a sea of fire. Just at this moment, a gust of wind blew. Just as Zhong Zhihao had flown a distance of about 1 zhong, Xiao Hua's figure actually flew out from the sea of fire under his feet. Xiao Hua's entire body was covered in flames, his face had some charred marks, and behind him was a flying sword. You! Seeing Xiao Hua actually directly fly out from the sea of fire and attack with his fist at close range, Zhong Zhihao was suddenly startled. But in his heart, he didn't take it seriously. Both of his hands moved, patting his storage bag, taking out an iron cloak talisman and a fireball talisman each. Only, in Zhong Zhihao's eyes, the fist that Xiao Hua struck towards his lower abdomen seemed to be different from before. Faintly, it seemed to be holding a pitch-black thing. What is this? Zhong Zhihao only had time to turn this thought before the thing in Xiao Hua's hand pierced his lower abdomen. Bang! A force much stronger than before struck Zhong Zhihao. The iron cloak talisman on Zhong Zhihao's body flashed brilliantly, and was pierced by the sharp object in Xiao Hua's hand almost without any resistance. A violent stinging pain came from Zhong Zhihao's abdomen. Zhong Zhihao's face was filled with disbelief, his eyeballs almost popping out. The iron cloak talisman in his right hand was still in midair, and the fireball talisman in his left hand had already turned into a fireball, but he forgot to hit the fleeing Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's attack succeeded. Seeing Zhong Zhihao take out the fireball talisman, he immediately let go of the spear in his hand and flew back to the distance. His face was pale as he looked at Zhong Zhihao. His eyes didn't even blink, appearing extremely nervous. He actually didn't even bother to extinguish the flames burning around his body. This. Zhong Zhihao's figure stopped in midair, and he lowered his head to look at his abdomen. The devil spear head was deeply pierced, and trickles of blood flowed out continuously like a stream, gradually submerging the devil spear head. Zhong Zhihao clenched his teeth and threw away the fireball. He patted his storage bag with his hand, wanting to take out the pills. The sharp spear head in the blood flashed with a strange black light. That black light followed the blood flowing out and flew into Zhong Zhihao's heart meridian. With just a light twirl, the true blood in the heart meridian was sucked into the spear head. -5. Chapter 1333. As for Zhong Zhihao, his vision went black, and he directly fell from the sky into the dust. He didn't have the slightest aura. Seeing Zhong Zhihao fall from the sky, Xiao Hua didn't dare to go forward. He didn't know what was going on with Zhong Zhihao. After all, he wanted to use the devil spear tip and his own strength to break Zhong Zhihao's confinement talisman. But he didn't expect the devil spear tip to directly pierce through the confinement talisman and pierce into Zhong Zhihao's abdomen. The confinement talisman on Zhong Zhihao's body hadn't completely collapsed yet, and he was afraid of Zhong Zhihao's fireball talisman, so he could only run away. As for the devil spear tip's power, he didn't know. His intuition told him that the spear tip that pierced into Zhong Zhihao's abdomen could only injure him. It couldn't take his life. So when he saw Zhong Zhihao fall into the dust, he only thought it was Zhong Zhihao's strategy to lure the enemy. Ouch! Just when Xiao Hua was hesitating, pain came from his body. The flames of the fire net talisman and fireball talisman had already broken the weak water talisman on his body and directly burned his body. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He brushed the back of his head and shot out 2 more weak water talismans. Only then did all the flames extinguish. But in this moment, his daoist robe was already burned to tatters. Alas, this fire net talisman is indeed a high-grade yellow talisman. Amazing. Xiao Hua stopped far away in the air and sighed with emotion. Also, my fireball talisman can actually be thrown out in large quantities. Why didn't I think of that? It made me dodge for a while. If I really ran into one, I wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion, but his eyes stared at Zhong Jihao's body on the ground, thinking about how to deal with it. In a moment, Xiao Hua's brows relaxed and he thought, I'm too nervous. Whether this guy is faking it or not, won't I know with a fireball talisman? Thinking of this, he flicked his hand, and a fireball talisman appeared. He urged his magic power, and it turned into a fireball that flew toward Zhong Jihao's body. Xiao Hua had made a lot of preparations and backups, but the fireball directly hit Zhong Jihao's body, which was still beyond his expectation. Seeing Zhong Jihao's body being burned to ashes by the fireball, Xiao Hua truly believed that a 4th-level qi refining cultivator had been killed by him. At this time, Xiao Hua didn't dare delay. He directly flew to the ground and picked up the devil's spear tip. Looking at it, there wasn't any change. He waved his hand and put it into the space behind his head. Then he tied his storage pouch that on his waist. As Zhong's pouch, Xiao Hua's storage pouch for I Xiao IIS for I for its halves have its a hundreds. ISSS, what's I, S halves for it. I have. It. Have STITSS of it. SS. I it. It. Thinking this, Xiao Hua didn't have time to look carefully at the contents of the storage pouch. He moved everything into the space behind his head. Then he casually tossed the storage pouch aside. Using his transcendence energy, he activated a flight talisman and flew towards Jingbua City at top speed. Zhong Jihao was originally fleeing towards Jingbua City, so Xiao Hua was also going in the same direction. In the time it took to eat a meal, he saw the city's shadow. The city's innumerable lights were reflected in the countless lakes, making them appear like specks of starlight. They were like the stars in the sky. The starlight in this lake seems a bit mysterious. Xiao Hua couldn't help but frown. However, he didn't have time to carefully examine it. He lowered his altitude and at the same time slowed down. Everything about his flight matched that of a 2nd-level qi refining cultivator. At the same time, he took out his concealment cloak and put it on. At this time, many people were coming out of Jingbua City. Very few people were going in. When they saw Xiao Hua, they couldn't help but give him a second glance. Fortunately, Xiao Hua was wearing a concealment cloak. His face couldn't be seen, so he wasn't afraid of leaking anything to 100 Herbs Gate. When he arrived at the entrance of Jingbua City, Xiao Hua was just about to step into the light curtain when a low, hoarse voice shouted, "Fellow Daoist, stop." Immediately after, a distorted figure appeared in the light curtain, blocking Xiao Hua's path. Xiao Hua was stunned. Not good. Could it be that the city gates are already closed? Sure enough, the Jingbua City disciple said, Jingbua City closes its gates. No outsiders are allowed to enter. Fellow Daoist, please turn back. This. Xiao Hua turned his head and looked at the many cultivators coming out of Jingbua City. Each of them was at the 4th level of qi refining or higher. They all seemed to be as honeyed as Zhong Jihao. Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel anxious. Senior, this junior's cultivation is too low. I'm afraid there will be some trouble tonight. Senior, please give me a way out. This is the iron law of Jingbua City. How could I dare to ignore it? If fellow Daoist doesn't have a proof of Jingbua City, then hurry up and go. While there are still many cultivators, find a few familiar and reliable ones. Proof of Jingbua City? Xiao Hua was delighted. He patted his storage pouch and took out the inn's yellow talisman. He handed it over and said, is this a yellow talisman? A divine sense came from the light curtain and swept over Xiao Hua's yellow talisman. The Foundation Establishment disciple said, this is the proof of Jingbua City. Why didn't fellow Daoist take it out earlier? Reporting to senior, this junior really didn't know. Please forgive me. Xiao Hua's face lit up with joy. Seeing the Jingbua City disciple's figure disappear, Xiao Hua hurriedly rushed into the light curtain, leaving behind a thin figure on the light curtain. When Xiao Hua's figure landed on the main street of Jingbua City, Xiao Hua's restless heart finally calmed down. He had a feeling of surviving a calamity. Immediately, Xiao Hua clasped his hands behind his back and walked unhurriedly along the main street towards the inn. As he walked, he thought about the process of killing Zhong Zhihao just now. After all, this was the first opponent Xiao Hua killed on the Xiaoyu continent. It was also the first time he had confidence in himself. This Zhong Zhihao is a 4th-level qi refinement expert. Whether it is his control of magic power, the use of yellow talismans, or his fighting experience, they are all far beyond this young master's reach. Being able to kill this bastard today is really a fluke. If it wasn't for that spear-tip devil weapon, this young master absolutely wouldn't have been able to kill him. Alas, it really is as this young master expected. Although this young master's flight is swift, it still can't avoid the yellow talisman's speed. This young master's strength is invincible, but it still can't destroy the yellow talisman with one punch. If this young master's strength was a little stronger, then using force to break the spell wouldn't be empty words. But now, I still have to rely on this spear tip. Speaking of which, I'm afraid this spear tip is also strange. Even if an ordinary spear tip pierced into Zhong Zhihao's abdomen, it would only cause some skin damage. A Wu Cheng pill should be able to heal it completely, not to mention taking his life. That's simply a fool's dream. Only, what's so strange about this spear tip? Could it be because it's a devil weapon? But if all devil weapons have this kind of magical use, why is it that Shi Wuming's devil weapon, no cultivator bought it? Although a piece of top-grade spirit stone is very expensive, who would complain about this killing weapon being expensive? Ayo, this young master is really muddle-headed. Xiao Hua suddenly slapped his forehead. Although devil weapons have this kind of life-threatening use, but, if it can't pierce into a cultivator's flesh, then isn't it the same as not having any use? Normally, cultivators would have defensive yellow talismans all over their bodies. Even some daoist robes had defensive properties that could block demonic artifacts. I'm afraid only this young master's arms have great strength, plus the weight of this spear tip itself, as well as the sharpness of the spear tip, can easily pierce through the defensive yellow talisman's brilliance. The more Xiao Hua thought about it, the more he felt that it was reasonable. The more he thought about it, the more excited he felt. If that was really the case, then, this would be Xiao Hua's one and only secret technique, the one and only way to break the spell using force. It would also be Xiao Hua's ultimate move to save his life. Only, this kind of technique still requires one to get close to the enemy. Xiao Hua immediately frowned. The cultivators of the country of Shi, who would let the enemy get close to them? I'm afraid that when they just started to attack, the yellow talismans would be like a storm raining down on them, right? That's right, speaking of raining down on them, I actually forgot about the fireball talismans. I thought that I could only use them one by one. I didn't expect that I could actually use them all at once. The might of a single fireball talisman is already so great, so a whole bunch of fireball talismans would be even more powerful. I didn't know that I actually sold so many fireball talismans. No wonder those cultivators were so affectionate when they saw me. They didn't bargain at all when they put away the fireball talismans. It turns out that there was a hidden meaning behind it. The next time I see someone who is impatient, I'll directly throw a bunch of fireball talismans at them. Wouldn't the whole world be peaceful then? It's not very good. If the enemy's speed is extremely fast, it can't be done. Didn't that guy Zhong Zhihao think that I was flying too fast, so he couldn't hit me with the fireball talismans? From this, increasing my flying speed is also my life-saving technique. Only by increasing my flying speed and catching the enemy off guard can I use this trump card. But how can I increase my flying speed? Xiao Hua thought again. Escape of light. If I have the speed of light, who can be this young master's opponent? The speed of light. How fast is that? What kind of realm is that? Thinking too much, Xiao Hua unconsciously became infatuated. He raised his head and looked at the sparkling starlight. It seemed that within the starlight, there was a Xiao Hua who was using escape of light. After returning to the inn, Xiao Hua's excitement from killing a high-level cultivator had already calmed down. He no longer had the excitement he had before entering Jinghua City. After this excitement, he reflected. After this first life and death battle, Xiao Hua deeply felt that the cultivation world of this dawn rain continent was really abnormally cruel. There was no reasoning at all. Everything depended on one's own strength and methods. He had only met this rogue cultivator named Zhong Zhihao once. He didn't know how he was targeted. He was very careful, but some of his whereabouts were still discovered. It seemed that he still had to be more cautious in the future. Moreover, even if he succeeded in killing Zhong Zhihao, he didn't use absolute strength after all. He only relied on some unexpected methods. These methods might be useful for a short period of time, but if he failed and others found out, he would definitely die without a burial ground. -5. Chapter 1334. Perhaps, only by raising my cultivation and killing Zhong Zhihao openly with my 5th level qi refining cultivation can I be considered a true success. Xiao Hua bit his lips, his eyes almost narrowed. For a moment, there was an unparalleled thirst for strength in his heart. One can't travel 1,000 miles without taking a few steps. My cultivation growth is slow, but it's still growth. As long as I work hard, there will be a day when I succeed. The only thing I can do now is to focus on cultivation and raise my magic power. Xiao Hua made up his mind and sat cross-legged. For several days, if he wasn't meditating and comprehending the heavens, he was cultivating the Songhua Darkheart technique, and he was refining fireball talismans and confinement talismans. Along with the gradual increase of his magic power and the gradual increase of his experience in refining yellow talismans, Xiao Hua's drawing of fireball talismans with a talisman brush actually made a breakthrough. He could already draw fireball talismans with great difficulty. Looking at the freshly made fireball talismans, Xiao Hua felt awkward in his heart. Not to mention anything else, just looking at the uneven lines on the yellow talisman and the slightly twisted runes, they all clearly indicated that this fireball talisman was nothing more than a ruffian for practice. But it just so happened that the power of this fireball talisman was not at the elementary level. With Xiao Hua's experience in refining high-grade fireball talismans, he could easily determine that this seemingly crooked fireball talisman was most likely a mid-grade one. Xiao Hua pondered, but to no avail. He could only attribute this peculiar phenomenon to his own fire attribute constitution. On this day, Xiao Hua refined a fireball talisman. His heart stirred and he thought to himself, after cultivating for several days, today should be the day of Jingbua City's change of market. Many sects in the country of Shi will come to Jingbua City to exchange what they have. Rare spiritual herbs, rare materials, they will all appear. Maybe I can even come across some cultivation methods. Not to mention cultivation methods, even some pill formulas or talisman refining methods might be possible. If I don't go take a look, wouldn't it be a pity? Xiao Hua already knew how to refine fireball talismans. Entering Heaven's Forsaken was already a foregone conclusion. Xiao Hua's consciousness entered his space and sorted out the yellow talismans he refined in the past few days. After the matter with Zhong Zhihao last time, Xiao Hua put everything inside his space. He only put some simple things in his storage pouch that matched his second layer aura refining cultivation. Hey! I forgot that the last time I killed Zhong Zhihao, I also took some things from his storage bag. I wonder what they are. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua began to tidy up Zhong Zhihao's things. On that day, Xiao Hua moved all the things in Zhong Zhihao's storage bag into his own space, but most of these things were Xiao Hua's own, so he was too lazy to look carefully. He only scolded the poor bastard in his heart and sighed at Zhong Zhihao's difficulties as a robber. Zhong Zhihao indeed didn't have many things. He only had a few dozen mid-grade spirit stones, some yellow talismans, some booklets, a few robes, and some other personal belongings. Ayo, I forgot. This guy is a 4th level qi refining cultivator, maybe he has a cultivation method. Xiao Hua suddenly remembered. He seemed to have a bit of an afterthought. It was obvious that he didn't have any experience in robbing. Icicle talisman? Xiao Hua took out the first book and looked at it carefully. He couldn't help but be somewhat disappointed. This guy doesn't know how to refine talismans at all. Where did he get the icicle talisman? He must have stolen it from somewhere. If it was before, Xiao Hua would definitely be very happy to get the icicle talisman. But now that he was looking forward to a cultivation method, although he was happy, he was also very disappointed. Following that, the next few books were either travel notes or incomplete pieces of silk. In the end, there was even a secret manual for dual cultivation. Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw it, but he was even more disappointed. Sure enough, he's a poor bastard. Not only do he have no spirit stones, he didn't even leave a cultivation method in his storage bag. Really, I don't know what to say about you. Can't you have a bit of the awareness of a rogue cultivator? Why did you carry everything with you? Xiao Hua cursed in his heart and threw the things back into the space. Xiao Hua was a bit uninterested in Zhong Jihao's daoist robe. He only wanted to take a look, but when he saw one of the rooms, his eyes widened. This is a maze. Are you a real fan? In Xiao Hua's hands, among the robes he took out from the space, there was one that was exactly the same as the one he saw. It was actually a genuine item from Chiqiao sect. Xiao Hua's mood suddenly became excited. He couldn't help but nag. Like I said, this guy must have robbed a lot. How could he not have anything good? Presumably, all his spirit stones and spiritual herbs were converted into top-grade spirit stones to exchange for this maze. Humph, there's no need to think about it. This guy was wearing this maze and following behind me, making me unable to detect him. This is great. Even death can't wipe out his crimes. He even tried to steal a chicken but ended up losing the rice used to lure it. He's benefiting me for nothing. What's the old saying again? If you always walk by the river, how can your shoes not get wet? Xiao Hua hummed an unknown tune as he put the maze into the space, thinking of using it himself in the future. Looking at the other robes, they were all ordinary. Xiao Hua didn't have the habit of wearing other people's robes. He threw out the fireball talisman he just refined and set the robes on fire. Although the fireball talisman Xiao Hua drew with a talisman pen looked terrible, its power was not bad. Although Xiao Hua had already controlled his magic power and there wasn't much spiritual energy in the room, it still made a sound, causing Xiao Hua to be surprised. The innkeeper won't come looking for trouble, right? Xiao Hua thought as he waved his sleeve, scattering the ashes of the robes on the ground. Hey, what is this? Xiao Hua's sharp eyes saw something that looked like a piece of gold leaf in the ashes. The gold foil was as thin as a book page. Xiao Hua exerted a bit of force and the gold foil could also be folded. However, when he loosened his hand, the gold foil would bounce open. Xiao Hua used his finger to lightly flick it and the gold foil would vibrate slightly. However, when Xiao Hua looked at it again and again, the gold leaf was still gold leaf. He couldn't see anything special about it. Since the gold leaf was found in the ashes of the daoist robe, Zhong Jihao must have hidden it in the daoist robe. Since he took it so seriously and didn't leave it in the storage bag, it must be something extremely important. But what is it? Or, this robe was also robbed and Zhong Jihao didn't know about it. Xiao Hua looked at the gold leaf in his hand thoughtfully. At this moment, the room's restriction shone slightly. Xiao Hua was surprised. This was the first time this kind of situation had happened. He didn't know how to deal with it. After a moment, the room started to tremble. Xiao Hua came to his senses and quickly stuck the yellow talisman on the door. He put the gold leaf in his hand into the space and prepared to escape. Fellow daoist. However, when Xiao Hua removed the restriction in the room, a gentle voice came from outside. Xiao Hua was surprised. He looked over and saw a Foundation establishment cultivator looking at him with wrinkled brows. Senior. Xiao Hua didn't feel at ease and quickly jumped out of the room. He looked back with lingering fear and cupped his hands. Senior, do you have any instructions? Hehe, I am the shopkeeper of this Fish Sun Inn. The cultivator smiled and returned the greeting. Ah, shopkeeper? Why is your inn's room suddenly shaking? Is it going to collapse? Xiao Hua quickly asked. As he spoke, he quickly walked away from the room. Fellow daoist, don't panic. This isn't a problem with the inn's room. It's I who called fellow daoist. The shopkeeper looked at Xiao Hua's cultivation and said with a smile, "Shopkeeper, why are you looking for I?" Xiao Hua immediately became vigilant. Nothing. Just now, fellow Daoist's room let out a huge rumble. I was afraid that fellow Daoist had an accident, so I came over to take a look. I already called you the first time, but fellow Daoist didn't respond, so I called you a second time. Xiao Hua's eyes swiveled. How could he still not understand what the shopkeeper was referring to? He hurriedly blushed and bowed, saying, "Junior accidentally drew a fireball talisman. I've truly nagged the shopkeeper, so it's like that." The shopkeeper looked inside the room. Sure enough, the fire attribute spiritual energy was abundant. He said with a smile, "Originally, fellow Daoist wasn't allowed to experiment with yellow talismans in the inn. However, fellow Daoist should also pay some attention. Fortunately, today is the day of the exchange. Apart from fellow Daoist, there's no one else in the inn. Otherwise, fellow Daoist would have greatly offended others." "Ah, they've already gone to Yi City?" Xiao Hua was stunned. He quickly cupped his hands and said, "Shopkeeper, excuse me. Junior also has to hurry to Yi City. I was careless and almost missed the time." The shopkeeper said with a smile, "No hurry. Right now, it's just noon. There's still many hours before the evening market closes. Fellow Daoist can stroll around as much as you want." "Oh, right, fellow Daoist's room is due today. Do you want to continue renting it?" Hearing the shopkeeper say that he was going to Yi City to stroll around, Xiao Hua was unhappy. He waved his hand and said, "Many thanks for Senior's reminder. Junior will return to the mountain after strolling around Yi City. I won't come to Jinghua City again." "All right, fellow Daoist, please. I hope that fellow Daoist will stay at Yuyang in the next time you come to Jinghua City." The shopkeeper smiled and raised his hand to salute. Xiao Hua saluted and left without looking back. Not long after leaving the inn, Xiao Hua first looked for a secluded place and draped Zhong Jihao's genuine camouflage cloak over his body, concealing his cultivation and even concealing Xiao Hua's height that was different from other. Xiao Hua finally understood that as long as there was a possibility of him being seen, he had to wear this camouflage robe. He couldn't repeat the mistake of being targeted by Zhong Jihao. In Easy City, not only would the 100 Herbs Gate come, there would also be a lot of small fries who wanted to take advantage of him. Xiao Hua had to be 100 times more careful. Yi City was in the same place as Yi Ji. Xiao Hua arrived at Yi City with ease. Today was clearly different from usual. Not to mention that he could hear the clamor of Yi City from far away, just by seeing the slightly multicolored brilliance in the sky above Yi City. Xiao Hua knew that Jinghua City's disciples were patrolling here again. Sure enough, when Xiao Hua arrived at the entrance of Yi City, a Jinghua City disciple around the 10th layer of Qi refining stopped him. This didn't exist in the previous Yi Ji. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Daoist, why don't you let I enter?" That disciple looked at Xiao Hua's camouflage robe and clearly didn't know Xiao Hua's cultivation. He smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist, this is your first time coming to Yi City, right?" -5 You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.